Okay. Good morning, everyone. We'll start today's very interesting session, which is framed in the context of the Global Fire Management Hub, which is a collaborative initiative with the Secretariat hosted by FAO. And I'm Amy Duchel. I lead the Forest and Climate team at FAO. Buenos días a todos. Vamos en esta primera parte tener traducción entre inglés y español. Entonces, vamos a comenzar hablando en inglés. Entonces, si ustedes hablan español, necesitan traducción, tenemos estos aquí, estos aparejos. Okay, so I will continue in English then, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this event where we've divided it in two parts. The pillars of the Fire Hub focus on knowledge sharing, capacity development, wildfire resilient communities, fire risk reduction and early warning, and policies for integrated fire management, with this idea that we're really trying to shift the focus from suppression to prevention and preparedness in fire management. And one of the key aspects of this is promoting wildfire resilient communities and especially Indigenous-led fire management. And so today's session is really incredible because we have a fully Indigenous-led panel to start. And then we will bring in members of government who have made specific efforts to include the issue of Indigenous peoples in their integrated fire management policies for the second piece of the session. So it's going to be very dynamic. And with that, I would already like to turn over to the first moderator of the first session, Robert Carroro, who's the vice co-chair of the Facilitative Working Group on Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples platform, which is part of the UNFCCC, but is a UN constituted body. And he's a very busy person right now, so we're lucky to have him. Robert, over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy, and a very good morning to you all. Again, my name is Robert Carroro. I'm indigenous from Kiribati, which is a small island state in the middle of the Pacific. And I'm currently the vice co-chair of the facilitative working group for the platform Local Communities and Indigenous People platform. So just a brief history on the Local Communities and Indigenous People platform. In this is our one constituted body within the UNFCCC that has indigenous regional reps from the 7 regions, including the Pacific, is where I'm sitting, and also party members. So it's one of the only constituted body that has indigenous and parties sitting together, ensuring that indigenous and local knowledge system are always incorporated in the different sectors within the UNFCCC, and that their voices are heard and their issues are heard, also reflected in policies in their respective countries. So without further ado, I would like to call upon our speakers for today. We have 3 speakers from the indigenous sector. We have Marco Martinez. If I call your name, please, you can come on stage. And we have Sarah Omi from the Global Alliance of Territory and Communities, Women Movement in Panama, Sarah. And Dane, right, the Senior Policy Advisor on Emergency Management, right, in Canada. So a big round of applause for our panelists today, this morning. We thank them for making it here early this morning. I know it's been a rough 2 weeks, right, and things are getting late, but I'm glad that we still have the strength. You all look very fresh, refreshed. Smile, smile. Yes. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves and what they work on before we jump into the questions that we have today for them. And just for a bit background, as indigenous people, we know that our knowledge systems and what we've had is something that is not usually put in policies, but our systems, the systems that they come up with, are systems that are sustainable, that have been used over the years, but have not been scientifically documented, or sometimes scientifically documented, but not well appreciated. And if they appreciate it, they are not accredited to the indigenous people. That's why we have our panelists here, and they'll talk more on this. So I could start with Marco to introduce himself and his work. While he's introducing, I'll probably let's just go direct into the session so that we have time, right? So we'll go to the first question. We can come and introduce yourself and then present your work. Eh? The first question to the panel is, could you please share some of your organization's experience on Indigenous people fire stewardship and how these lessons can inform and can be integrated into global Indigenous-led fire management policies? Okay, I'll repeat that question again for everyone. And this is a question for the three of you. You can introduce yourself. You can come up here, or if you want to sit there, we can pass the mic, right? Again, could you please share some of your organization's experience on Indigenous peoples' fire stewardship and how these lessons can inform and can be integrated into the global Indigenous-led fire management policy? Now I give the floor to our colleague Marco to introduce himself and introduce his work to all of us. Over to you, Marco.
Sorry, just solo porque parece que la traducción al español no está funcionando bien, solo para decir que el compañero está pidiéndoles que se presenten y a la vez respondan a la pregunta cómo las técnicas, las tradiciones de combate del fuego que ustedes usan en sus pueblos pueden ser incorporadas en políticas a nivel nacional o internacional. Esa es la pregunta. Sorry, it's just the translation was apparently not working. Sorry.
So are you willing to translate for the team? No, just him. Oh, all right.
Hola, buenos días, hermanos y hermanas. A nombre de la coordinadora de las organizaciones indígenas de la Cuenca Amazónica, COICA, como también de Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, pues mi nombre es Marco Martínez, soy shuar de la Amazonía sur del Ecuador y estoy aquí para poder compartir con ustedes nuestra cultura, nuestra vivencia en los territorios, en nuestra casa común, en nuestro espacio de vida. Y llegamos hasta aquí para poder compartir. Pues en nuestra tradición, la cultura shuar se cuenta que el espíritu del amanecer entregó a los pueblos el fuego como un don para sostener la vida y no para destruirla. Ese fuego debía usarse con respeto, entendiéndole el viento, la humedad, las plantas y la voluntad de la naturaleza. Cuando ese equilibrio se rompe, dice nuestra tradición, el fuego ya no obedece al pueblo, obedece al caos.
Sorry, apparently the translation is not working, so I'll do some consecutive translation. Marco Martinez introduced himself as a leader from the Shuar people in Ecuador. He's also leader of COICA, the organization encompassing 9 countries in the Amazon region. So he was explaining about first what was the tradition for the Shuar people. He said that in the tradition, Etza, the spirit of dawn, of morning, give the fire to the people as a gift to sustain life, not to destroy it. The fire should be used with respect and understanding wind, moisture, plants, and the will of nature. But when this balance is broken, following the tradition, the fire does not obey to people. It obeys to chaos. Next.
El fuego actual no es fuego indígena. El fuego que arrasa millones de hectáreas no nace de nuestra cultura, nace de la deforestación, el acaparamiento de tierras, la expansión agropecuaria y la minería que fragmenta el bosque. En 2024 ardieron cerca de 3 millones de hectáreas, el peor año del siglo. Se emitieron 791 millones de toneladas de CO2. Y lo más grave, hasta el 22% de los focos ocurrieron dentro de los territorios indígenas.
So the present fire is not an indigenous fire. The fire who is devastating millions of hectares is not born from our culture. It is born from deforestation, land grabbing, and farming extension, and also from mining that are fragmenting the forest. In 2024, 3 million hectares burned, and it was the worst year of the century, and 791 million tons of CO2 were emitted. And one of the worst things is that 22% of these forest fires began inside indigenous territories.
El manejo indígena del fuego. Los pueblos indígenas de los 9 países amazónicos conservamos prácticas que controlan el fuego desde hace miles de años. Quemamos a pequeña escala y en el tiempo exacto. Conocemos los ciclos del bosque, el clima y el territorio. Tenemos normas comunitarias, rituales y sistemas propios de vigilancia. En nuestros territorios, cuando hay titulación y gobernanza fuerte, los incendios y la deforestación son dramáticamente menores. Este es nuestro aporte central a la región. Sabemos usar el fuego sin destruir el bosque.
So how indigenous peoples manage fire? The indigenous people from the 9 Amazon countries have been using fire following rules that date to thousands of years. We burn in a very small scale and in the right time. We know cycles of forest, of the climate and the territory. We have communal regulations, we have rituals and our own monitoring systems. And in our territories, when you have secure tenure and strong governance, fires and deforestation are dramatically less. This is our central, what you give to the region. We know how to use fire without destroying the forest.
Las exigencias de la coordinadora de las organizaciones indígenas de la cuenca amazónica con más de 511 pueblos. Derechos territoriales y titulación. Sin territorio asegurado, no hay prevención posible. Brigadas indígenas permanentes, reconocidos por los estados y financiadas de forma estable. Sistema de alerta temprana cogestionados que unan tecnología satelital con monitoreo comunitario. Integración plena de conocimiento tradicional en los planes nacionales de fuego y en la implementación de la meta 3 de biodiversidad. Financiamiento directo a los pueblos indígenas a través del Fondo Amazonía para la Vida y otros mecanismos.
So what are COICA's demands? The first demand is territorial rights and titling. Without secure tenure, there is no possible prevention. Second demand is that permanent indigenous brigades should be recognized by states and funded in a stable way. Third demand that monitoring and early warning systems should be co-managed using satellite technology with community monitoring. Also including the traditional knowledge in national fire plans and implementation of target 3 of biodiversity. And finally, direct funding to indigenous peoples through the Amazon for Life Fund and other mechanisms.
En esto quiero enmarcar, hermanos y hermanas, aquí estamos pueblos indígenas, está la FAO, está Alianza Global y todos, sobre todo la humanidad entera. Si nosotros cuidamos, si nosotros estamos aquí para dar la vocería, es con la finalidad de seguir contribuyendo con la crisis, frente a esta crisis climática. Nosotros no vamos a ser los responsables. Hemos dicho en varias ocasiones, los pueblos originarios del mundo, de las siete regiones, tenemos la solución en nuestras manos. Por lo tanto, el fuego responde a quien respeta la vida. Muchas gracias. Buenos días.
So Marco was concluding saying that the indigenous peoples have this mission of protecting the earth and have been protecting it for centuries in the 7 regions. And he finished with a quote from the Shuar knowledge that said, more or less, if I remember, because someone closed the slide, he said, the fire respects who respects life. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marco, for those wonderful and insightful knowledge that you have shared with us. Just to recap some of the aspects that you mentioned, I think what struck me was right at the beginning when you said fire is a gift to mankind, to your indigenous community, and it should be treated with respect. So I think that's an important lens that we can look, and that's how indigenous people see and how they relate with the elements around them. And part of it was that if you treat fire with respect, fire will treat you with respect. If you don't obey fire or treat it with respect, fire will then go to chaos. And that's what we see today. And also mentioning how this current fire that we see, we could see it as global warming, is not from the indigenous people. It's, if I sum up what he said, it's from deforestation and most likely the industrial revolution that has caused fire that is associated with chaos because it disobeys and disrespects nature itself. Now I go on to our second speaker, our beautiful lady, Amy, Sarah. Amy's here. Sarah, to introduce herself and also share her knowledge and work that she has done in the women movement that she is currently associated with in Panama. The floor is yours, Sarah.
Hola, buenos días. Muchas gracias por la invitación a este importante panel. Como lo comentaba mi hermano del pueblo Shuar, desde el movimiento de mujeres de la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, es importante primero iniciar con la participación de las mujeres indígenas, porque como lo decía, desde la espiritualidad de los pueblos indígenas, las mujeres están conectadas con ese trabajo, porque somos las mujeres desde muy temprano en nuestras tareas, pues se dedican justamente a preparar los alimentos para sus familias, a cómo calentar también la misma esencia de nuestras casas para poder iniciar un día de trabajo de la mano con nuestra familia y sobre todo para poder seguir fortaleciendo nuestros conocimientos tradicionales. Las mujeres pues no pueden estar separadas también de este mecanismo. Cuando existen las grandes afectaciones, estamos en esa primera línea, pero también siempre desde la sabiduría y de la espiritualidad que nos transmiten nuestras abuelas, nuestras madres. No sé si están interpretando o alguien.
Is someone willing to help us interpret what our colleague here is saying? It'd be great. Thank you.
Y para nosotras estar aquí desde Panamá en esta primera reunión que se da a nivel global es un referente importante de que nosotras las mujeres debemos también estar en el centro de los debates, de la discusión, para poder también acompañar estos procesos que se refieren directamente al impacto que provocan dentro de nuestros territorios.
Hi, good morning. From Sarah Omin. Thanks for the invitation to the women's movement of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities. When we are discussing about the fire management, first of all, we have to take into account that the participation of the indigenous women comes from spirituality. And this early connection comes from early life, when they, as little girls, learn to prepare food from the families with the same families. It is very important to help the family also from the strength gained from traditional knowledge, passed from generation to generation. Women are indeed in the first line of affectations of all fire or climate issues, and from generations they come strengthening this line from their own grandmas and the women in their family line. It is a very good news that in this first meeting that was held in Panama, this first global meeting, indigenous women were taking part of the discussions, because indeed women must be at the center of the discussion, because the discussion at the end is about the impact in the territory.
Y el estar aquí sigue también reflejando esa vivencia nuestra de que las mujeres tienen en sus manos también el futuro de nuestros territorios, el futuro de nuestra madre tierra, porque somos la que transmitimos esa enseñanza del cuidado de ese fuego, de cómo se debe realizar en nuestras comunidades, pero también está de la mano con la propia gobernanza de los territorios. En nuestras comunidades existen normas, reglas del momento de cómo utilizar el fuego cuando se van a dedicarse a la agricultura tradicional de nuestros pueblos, de cómo protegen sus cultivos, de cómo protegen todo lo que se siembran alrededor de nuestros territorios, pero estas políticas también o normas internas a veces no son reconocidos por nuestras instituciones o no existen normas claras también al momento de trabajarla dentro de nuestros territorios, por lo cual se necesitan crear mayor política de reconocimiento de esos conocimientos como soluciones de buenas prácticas que se tienen desde los pueblos indígenas. Y por eso seguimos estando aquí, alzando nuestras voces, para que podamos seguir impulsando a que nuestros derechos se garanticen plena y efectivamente.
Being here today is very important because Indigenous women hold the future. Indigenous women hold the future of the territories, and Indigenous women hold the future of Mother Earth in their own hands. Indigenous women are learning to take care of fire, about fire management from an early age. And in addition, there is also a sense of governance in the territories. It is very important to respect the governance of the territories, because also there are some rules linked to this governance. These rules are meant to protect the territories from fire and also to protect the crops from fire. But when we thought about these rules about fire management, it's not the case that rules are always clear. Sometimes we need new rules to face new problems, and also we need to increase the acknowledgement of the importance of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous women on the fire management. We also need to work more in developing good practices to support Indigenous peoples around fire management. And also, very important, we need to support the full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples so we are able to protect Indigenous peoples' rights.
Y para terminar, también conectar de que nuestras agendas desde el movimiento de mujeres se conectan justamente con las demandas de la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, que tiene que ver con que se garanticen el derecho territorial de los pueblos indígenas, a que se respete la consulta libre, previa e informada, el acceso a financiamiento directo también hacia nuestros territorios como actores principales que protegemos, que cuidamos, que tenemos el equilibrio con nuestra madre tierra, así como también el reconocimiento de nuestros conocimientos tradicionales como soluciones de buenas prácticas y la no criminalización de los líderes y lideresas que defienden la vida. Al final, todos estos elementos de derecho se reflejan justamente en la importancia de que para nosotros el fuego no es simplemente fuego, sino que tiene conocimiento, tiene espiritualidad y está en manos de las mujeres indígenas.
These agendas that must be connected to the women's movement are also, of course, reflecting the demands of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities. These 5 demands of the Global Alliance are, in first place, to guarantee land rights to the Indigenous peoples, land rights for their territories, also to guarantee the free, prior, and informed consent when decisions are taken over the land. Also, direct financing, to ensure direct financing will allow Indigenous peoples to protect and balance Mother Earth as main actors in that fight. Also, traditional knowledge that has to be linked to the solutions of good management of the territory. And of course, very important, to stop the criminalization of those that are protecting life on Earth with their own lives in the territories in the front line. That's why fire is very important, because fire is not just fire. Fire also holds knowledge, fire holds spirituality, and this fire is in the hands of indigenous women.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for our last-minute interpreters that we have here. Very thankful for your assistance in participation here. Yes, just a few reflection on what our lovely lady here said. Yes, the importance of having women in this discussion. And I was also in the meeting in Panama, where a lot of women were represented during the session, indigenous women. And it was a space created to ensure that inclusivity, all the knowledge that they have, because everyone is affected, and as she mentioned, women are also in the front line, right? Because they're the ones running and looking after the kids, ensuring their safety in this sort of disaster. So I thank you so much for your insights. And now, for time, I'll jump to our final speaker. He can introduce himself and his work.
Thank you very much. Tanche Kia, Dane D'Souza, Dinesh Nakashan. Good to see everyone. My name is Dane D'Souza. I'm a citizen of the Métis Nation, one of the 3 distinct national Indigenous identities in what is now currently known as Canada. I was born and raised in Treaty 7 territory, Mohkinstsis, Calgary, Alberta. You see those mountains there? I'm not sure if they're mine, but that's where I grew up. That's where home is, or what it looks like to me. I currently work as a senior policy advisor on emergency management for the Métis National Council, my people. I'm also an Indigenous fire stewardship researcher, and prior to this I worked for 6 years as a wildland firefighter in those mountains and all across North America, working on the largest and most headline-making wildfires all those summers. I've been on fires that are larger than some of the states that are here negotiating. Before I get going here, just a show of hands from the audience, who here has actually ever been on a wildfire, actually had ash underneath your boots, felt the fire on your skin? Has anybody here ever actually seen a wildfire? Put them higher, you should be proud. So when we talk about wildfire, the words that we use to describe fire give it agency. Fire runs, it walks, it creeps, it crawls, it jumps. That's because fire has life and agency. Now, let's think about what it means to be Indigenous. A lot of people will tell you that Indigenous means you were colonized, and that's not the case. What makes somebody Indigenous, or in a culture and an identity Indigenous, is a profound connection to the land, the waters, the skies, and all of the creatures and relations we share that land with. For myself and my people, fire is how we connect to the land. I'm going to point to those mountains again. Those mountains from where I'm from, 14,000 years ago, from those mountains to the Hudson's Bay, North America was under the Laurentide glaciers, a kilometer-thick sheet of ice. And as those glaciers receded, every single centimeter of the way, my ancestors, Indigenous peoples, the original land stewards, were there, using fires to set the tone and the rhythm of the forest in the land to suit our needs. I don't have too much in common in my landscape with Panama or Brazil or even Africa, but every time I've talked to Indigenous peoples in these spaces and others from around the world, we talk about our connection to the land through fire. Using fire to steward and modify our landscapes is a very human thing, and it's something that's been disrupted by colonialism. So the wildfires that are occurring in my country, in 2023, the emissions from wildfires in Canada put more GHGs into the atmosphere than the entire global airline industry for that year combined. And that does not make it into the carbon accounting or the GHG accounting that we are here to discuss. So don't feel bad about your flight home. Those fires, those emissions are not caused by climate change. They're exacerbated by climate change. Those fires are caused by colonialism. 200 years ago, the first laws in Canada in banning Indigenous fire stewardship were passed. And when you look at the correspondence to the Crown, who was in control of Canada at the time, they quote unquote say, the wanton burning of the savages is in direct conflict in the King's economic interest in the forests of Canada. So they started to ban our burning. And that forest that you see right there, it's thick, it's dense, it's conifer rich, it's packed with oils. When that fire burns in that forest, nothing will stop it now. 100 years ago, that forest didn't look like that. That forest had patches of prairies and medicines and gardens and areas for buffalo and moose to come graze because we stewarded those lands to have those features. So if you picture the boreal forest today, it's an unbroken sea of trees. And as fire comes through, it's like a tidal wave that only gathers more and more energy until it becomes unstoppable. 200 years ago, when that same fire would come through the boreal forest, it would hit little islands and pockets that had burned recently or been burned recently to propagate different species growing. And it would hit those little islands and lose energy. That's what we've lost now. What we're doing in Canada at the Métis National Council to write this is we're doing our best to bring back Indigenous fire stewardship, to make sure that we are speaking with our firekeepers and our elders to have that knowledge and understanding. I've even written a children's book on the concept of good fire, because when we talk about fire, the Western concept is all fires are bad. In our culture, in our worldview, not all fires are bad. There are good fires. So we're trying to bring those back culturally. But also we're currently working on a project that takes into account all of the barriers to putting good fire back on the land: financial, institutional, knowledge gaps, bureaucratic. And I want to be very clear on this. The reason we're not able to burn is not because boots on the ground practitioners from Western and Indigenous knowledge science disagree that this is what we must do. It's that there is no political capital in preventing wildfires. If you prevent wildfires and you do the right thing, no one knows you did it. If no one knows you did it, you cannot get reelected for it. So when you forego these solutions and then you have these astronomical wildfire impacts, as a politician, you can stand next to a plane of wildfire fighters from foreign countries getting off and going to go fight the fires, and you can say, wow, look, we're doing everything we can. But then when winter comes, those same politicians, those same decision makers aren't picking up the phone, aren't investing in prevention and mitigation. They're continuing to double down on these false solutions, to use an overused term. So I know that's not the quickest way of answering that question, but those are the things that we're working on back home. And I think it's really important that everybody walks away from this talk understanding that your satellites, your data, your lab, et cetera, aren't a solution. They support a solution, but wildfires are a landscape-based phenomenon. They happen on the land. They are a living, breathing communication of the land. As I said earlier, they walk, they breathe, they run. Fires don't have modalities.
Thank you, Neem, for those wonderful insights. And I know it strikes me that some of this knowledge, some of this information you shared also new to me, how forest fire carbon emissions or greenhouse gases emissions are not taken into consideration in when we're looking at global emissions. So other things that I would say really strike me about your presentation is also that good to have a person who've experienced this. I come from Coral Atoll. We don't even have a forest, and it's in the middle of the ocean. So forget about getting a forest fire, and somehow FAO wanted me to moderate this session. But it's a good learning experience from my part of the world as well to see the issues that are happening across the world. From my region, since I represent the Pacific and Australia and New Zealand is included, there was a study last year published by the ANU, Australian National University, on fire, indigenous knowledge. And what they actually found was something you resonate, the three of you. The indigenous people of Australia did forest fire, burn shrubs, ensuring that these shrubs do not grow big, and then when it when it catches fire, just burns the entire forest. So what they actually saw, and this is a research done, what they actually saw that the times when the indigenous people were settling in that area, there was no major fire. That was catastrophe. That was catastrophic proportion. But they had sediments of fire, of very small sediments of fire that were, from the shrubs that they were burning, ensuring that they don't grow and overtake the forest. After the indigenous people were removed, and what I resonate here, how they're removed from their territories, then we have these massive fires. And that's research done. So the indigenous knowledge knew this beforehand. And it's sad that you also mentioned, and it's across the world when this indigenous practice have to be criminalized. And now some countries are coming back, some states are coming back to see this indigenous knowledge. Hey, these people got it right from the beginning, 200, thousands of years ago before we even came in. And I think that's an important aspect that our three panelists have raised here, and something we can learn from. I'd like to conclude here because I have another session to attend. It's starting right now, but I'll hand over the mic to Amy to co-facilitate. And again, a round of applause to our panelists this morning.
Thank you so much. Great, thank you. That was incredibly rich. I mean, thank you so much. Y me disculpo por la traducción, fue imposible, pero gracias a Michelle y Gloria por ser nuestros voluntarios y ayudar en este momento. So we will now, this was really a nice perspective really from the ground and from what's needed in terms of land management. Oh yeah, photo with this, sorry. Una foto. Y Cacique Gabriel, ¿quiere?
Which one are we looking at?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And this is that was an incredible first part of the session, and now we're thinking of how the policy framework can support these kinds of actions on the ground. And several countries have made huge strides forward despite the complexities of including the historical legacies. And those countries are Brazil, Australia, and Canada, among others. But we're very privileged today to have some great speakers from the government perspective and also from a practitioner's perspective. First of all, André Lima, National Secretary for the Special Secretariat for Deforestation Control of the Brazilian Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. André, please. You've seen André, I'm sure, a million times because I think he's been speaking all over this COP. But he has a very important role in terms of leading Brazil's deforestation control and fire programs. So I'll call everybody up and then we'll do the slides. Next is Luke Hines-Bishop from the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Climate Counselor in Latin America. Yes. And then we have Max Yamuchi-Levy of Eco-Agriculture Partners, and one of the partners of Canada's International Model Forest Network, which is a very important way that Canada's policy is across the globe. So you can all have a seat there, and then we will bring up some slides because these gentlemen have some visuals to show us. We'll start with André. Just 1 second while we bring this up, and then Anik will move the slides. And we hope the translation's working. It should be channel 4. They will all speak in English, and it will go to Spanish. So I really hope that it will work. So if you need Spanish translation, it should be working. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I think it's the third or fourth meeting you have watched this speech, at least 3 times, but so you approved my speech, so it's good. Good morning, all. Thank you for this. Yeah. The other one. Thank you.
There you go. Again.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about what Brazil is doing to face this huge challenge that are the wildfires. So she will. The first you can. But before I start talking about what we are doing, it's important to bring a little bit about the contest, the climate contest that we are facing. So over the past 25 years, Brazil has suffered significantly from drought and heat waves. And each year they have become more intense, frequent, and longer. During this period in Brazil, as you can see here in this water depth index, from 1980 to 2025, the proportion of precipitation versus evapotranspiration has changed significantly. Brazil has become more vulnerable to forest fire each year. As you can see, the red part of this index is the drought season. And below, -1 indicates drought anomalies. And you can see it's all Brazil in the first one, and the second one is in the Amazon. And in the last 10 years, we are facing droughts very severe. Next. This next slide shows another important information. The share of total deforestation in the Amazon caused by forest fires increased from 7% in 2022 to 38% in 2025. So we can see that the participation of forest fires in the collapse of Amazon forest in Brazil is increasing. One information is because we are being very well succeed. We have success in decreased deforestation, but the fires is being the worst problem that we are facing in a couple of years. So a growth of the fire in the collapse of forests exceeding 500% in only 3 years, from 2022 to 2025. So since then, and since before then, since the beginning of this new government, from 1st January 2023, we have been working extremely hard to improve and implement our new national integrated management fire policy to overcome all of these vulnerabilities. So in the next slide, I show you some actions that we have taken to implement this new policy. In only 1 year, 7 provisory measures signed by the president to enhance rules and approve additional budget. The provisory measure is a kind of a law, is an executive order signed by the president, but with the power of law. So it's a very 7 in only 1 year is an inédito. How do I say? Is a new issue. More than 1.5 billion reais, which is more for about $350 million were invested to tackle forest fires and the impact of drought in the Amazonia and Pantanal only in last year. More 400 million only to forest fire were invested to forest firefighters in the 9 Amazon states. From this money is from the Amazon Fund. Another 150 million to Pantanal and Cerrado state governments, subnational governments, also from Amazon Fund was invested. And we are start working with the local government to bring them to develop and implement local plans to prevent and control deforestation, but also integrated fire management. It's very important to bring the local government, not only the state government and the federal government, and also involving local communities, indigenous communities. In Brazil, it's very important to engage the landowners, because more than 50% of the fire occurs in private properties, in big farms. We have also action plans to prevent and control deforestation and wildfires in all biomes. We have 6 biomes. We have Amazonia, we have our savanna Cerrado, our wetland Pantanal is the biggest wetland in the world. We have also Caatinga and Pampa and Atlantic rainforest. So we have plans to face forest fires in all the 6 biomes. The next, please. But the most important is the approval of this new law, this new federal law, 14944, that was approved last year in July next year, creating the national policy for integrated fire management that changed all the approach of this problem. So now we are really initiating and implementing a policy that faces the problem by preventing, by preparing, by planning, not only by suppressing fires in Brazil. And also we have a decree that creates an important governance system, our National Committee for Integrated Fire Management, we call COMIF, and also a federal instance, a federal forum to coordinate all the operational and interoperational works to suppress fire. The CIMAN is the Federal Integrated Multi-Agency Center for Operational Cooperation. And this national committee, which makes the rules, which makes the guidelines, and makes all the coordination with local communities. We have the participation of local communities, traditional people, indigenous people. We have also the landowners, the private landowners, the local government, the state governments, and 10 different ministries participates in this commission, this committee that is working very hard to put the law, to make the law achieve the field and change the reality. In less than 1 year, this committee had more than 40 meetings, and we approved 4 important resolutions. One of them is the number 2, the resolution 2, that defines the guideline about what is an integrated fire management plan, which is really more than the using of prescribed fires. We are working in a land and a territorial planning to make the communities more prepared, and also the territories. And the second, the resolution 3, creates a legal binding preventive measures on rural properties. We need to share the responsibility with the landowners in Brazil. It's not an issue or a problem of the government. It's also something that needs to be faced by the landowners on the ground. That creates the data systems, the integrated fire management data system we call SISFOGO, to put all the information and data in the same system that everyone in the system can access in real time information about what's going on, what's been doing in all around the country in the 3 levels of government, federal, states, and local governments. And what we can see in the next slide, the first results are coming. Of course, that we are starting the implementation of this new policy. We have a little bit more than 1 year of implementation, but we are seeing the first results are very, very interesting. In the Pantanal, our wetland, we reduced 93% all the total area that was burned in 2025. In Amazonia, 75.8. In Mata Atlântica, we reduced it. In Atlantic rainforest, we reduced more than 62% the total area that was burned in 2025. In Pampa, 41%. In Caatinga, 12%. In our Cerrado, 70.6%. In Brazil, in all our national territory, we reduced for about 40%. And it's very important to stress that this is a reduction not in comparison to the last year that was a very huge rates of fire in Brazil, but is a reduction in comparison to the 8 years average of burned areas in Brazil. So this means that we are here really being more prepared and more engaged. The Brazil is trying to do what we need to do. So thank you, Amy, thank you all. I'll be here to answer any question if you have. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's nice. I think the first time I hear the presentation in English, so that was nice. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much. And really, Brazil is one of the few countries in the world, I don't know how clear this is, with a national integrated fire management policy. There are a handful of countries, and Brazil is one of those. Yeah.
I forgot to say that we are using the prescribed burning in Brazil, and in this year, 2025, we burned 400,000 hectares in protected areas and indigenous land as prevention action, and it's very important. We are increasing and upscaling the prescribed fire as a prevention measure.
Amazing, thanks. Thank you. So now we'll turn to Australia, and Dr. Luke Hines Bishop, again, Climate Change Counselor in Latin America and the Caribbean, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And Australia is quite interesting, and when we had our plenary, our Fire Hub plenary in June, we had quite a representation actually of Indigenous peoples from Australia there, speaking about cultural burning and how that's being supported by Australia's public policies as well. And so, we want to get a taste of, the domestic situation on fire management because Australia is such a leader in the space, but then also this connection of, supporting cultural burning. Yep.
Thank you very much. So look, I'll just start by laying a bit of the scene of the context in Australia, talk a bit about our integrated fire management and how that works and the governance around that, and then talk about how we're integrating traditional owner and traditional knowledge practices as part of this response. So look, Australia and fires are an integral part of our ecosystem. We're a very dry landscape, and our trees, the predominant tree there, the eucalypt tree with eucalyptus oil is, as you probably know, it's incredibly flammable. So fires are a normal part of our ecosystem, and living with fire has been a part of our history. Nevertheless, climate change is really changing this dynamic and really changing the intensity of the fires, the frequency, the scale, but also more importantly, the fire patterns and how we respond to these are far more volatile and unpredictable, which is really changing how we have to respond to this. And I think our colleague from Canada really talked about the fact that there's not a preparing for fires, there's not necessarily the political will always, and it really took a major event in 2019 to really put it, it's always been on the political radar, but really increase at a point of inflection. You may have seen the 2019 bushfires in Australia, which were, although we've had major fires, these were unprecedented in the scale, the duration, the intensity, and the fact that they also occurred in parts of Australia that don't traditionally have wildfires, such as in our tropical forests. So over 8 million hectares were burned in the 2019 bushfires, which is more than all of our emissions combined. So we're 1% of global emissions, so I think it's something similar to the airline emissions. So it was a really catastrophic affair. So although obviously in the case of Australia we can't eliminate the threat of wildfires and climate change is going to make it worse, we do know that there are steps that we can take, policies that we can put to try to prevent the scale and the intensity of these fires and hopefully also their frequency. So I'm going to discuss a little bit around some of the governance to start with. In terms of how we address fire management in Australia, there are really 4 components. So they start obviously with response planning and how you can start to visualize and prepare for that. And then you move obviously into one of the most important, which is hazard reduction and preventative action. And this is really a lot of community outreach and also reducing the fuel for the fires themselves. And this is where what I'll come to later in the slide around traditional knowledge practice and cultural burning really comes into its importance. And then lastly, the third part is around emergency response and firefighting, actually engaging with this. And then obviously at the end, it's recovery and rehabilitation. Next. So this is the previous slide, thanks. Thanks. So just quickly touch on governance, because Australia is a little bit unique in the way that we do it. Responsibility for bushfire management is across the 3 different levels of government. So there's the national level, the subnational, so states and territories, and the local government. We're a federal system, so just to sort of give you a little bit of a taste of that, the national government is fundamentally responsible for responding to significant wildfires that supersede the jurisdiction of a single state or territory to be able to respond to. Particularly after the 2019 bushfires, we increased the infrastructure of our national level, particularly through the creation of the National Emergency Management Agency, which leads coordination of not only financial responses to communities affected, but the interoperability across different services, sharing of information, data, and really information sharing function and intelligence, and helping to coordinate across these multi-jurisdictions. Then it's really at the state and territory level where the vast majority of all the action and preparedness comes, because they are responsible for land and fire management, the national parks, the state parks, etc. And then at the final part is the local government, which is really on the territories themselves, and they're really responsible for land use planning, which is particularly important in the urban areas, and especially where urban and rural areas combine. While obviously the arrangements vary a little bit between the jurisdictions, each state and territory has in place systems to help coordinate the bushfire responses and work across their respective agencies. And very importantly, our emergency management and land management agencies within Australia all use the same incident control system for emergency management, and this is known as the Australasian Inter-Service Incident Management System. It doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but it's very useful in terms of providing the same command and control structure across all the different agencies, as well as using the same terminology, which helps, especially if there's a major bushfire in a particular state, being able to ensure interoperability between all the different various agencies that are responsible for firefighting. Next slide, thank you. So now I'm going to turn a little bit to the way in which, thank you, the way in which our First Nations communities have been managing this issue, and how we've also started to integrate them within our sort of fire response and integrated fire management. So for over 65,000 years, traditional owners have been managing fires and changing the landscape. Just to echo again our talk from our Canadian colleague, it really does resonate also within the Australian context, in which our ecosystem was thoroughly changed by our Indigenous traditional owners in terms of reducing the kinds of landscapes that were like a huge sort of woodland areas that were very sort of risky for fires, and really changing the ecosystem in such a way as to reduce the extent of these intense fires through cultural burning practices, which are not only obviously they have their ecological sort of purposes, but also very strong social and cultural sort of values within that. And then obviously, pretty similar in the case of Canada, after colonization, a lot of these practices were banned, and then you've had over 100 years or so, and many decades in this century as well, the scrublands and the fuel for the fires has grown and out of control because these practices were banned. So in recent years, there's been a real shift to try to integrate these into how we respond to fires. So what a lot of our Indigenous communities use is cultural burning, which is small lit fires used in mosaic patterns to help reduce the fuel for the fires, while protecting the tree canopies, clearing the ground, and encouraging new growth. It helps to reduce emissions, while at the same time helping to store carbon and reducing the frequency and the extent of the large, intense fires that obviously release large amounts of methane and greenhouse gas emissions. And so what it really is looking at is low and sort of and small-scale fires, so that when the fire season inevitably comes, they're not large and massive, but they're very small-scale and they're not fast and out of control. There's more time to predict and more time to prepare for when they do inevitably come. Other benefits from this obviously include improving the soil health. Australia is a dry continent. We don't have the massive rivers and ecosystems, so fires do play a role in helping the nutrients in the soil. It increases biodiversity and the resilience of the ecosystems, improves habitat quality and pastures, and then obviously it does help to protect life and property by reducing the ultimate impacts of bushfires when they come. Next slide, thank you. So it can be used in a range of ecosystems, but it's particularly something which is prevalent in grasslands, savanna, and woodlands. And one thing I did want to touch on in terms of how we're working with it is the ways in which the Australian government finances and helps to support these cultural practices through the use of our carbon credit unit scheme. So projects under our savanna management methods can earn carbon credits by using strategic low-intensity cultural burning during the early dry season to help reduce the frequency of large, high-intensity fires in the later dry season that obviously reduce release those high quantities of greenhouse gas emissions. The savanna management methods are used in over 24 million hectares of northern Australian savanna and are estimated to abate around 1.2 megatons of emissions per year. On average, more or less, they earn around $50 million in carbon credits that they sell on the market to help support jobs in Indigenous communities, while at the same time helping to pass on traditional knowledge and play that important role. Importantly, they also work very closely with the local governments, but also with the state and territories to play an integral role within our broader integrated fire management response mechanisms. And so this is just really one way and an example that I wanted to highlight today of how, as part of this broader governance that we have from our integrated fire management, the role in which traditional knowledge can play within that. And obviously we're still learning, we're still trying to develop this and enhance it, but it's something which is certainly gaining more traction within the Australian government. So thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much for that overview. And this last slide was quite interesting, and I know that there's been a lot of knowledge transfer, also including to Southern Africa, from this model of the carbon crediting and community-led carbon crediting with fire management. So that's been a really interesting aspect that Australia has brought to the world. So thank you for that overview. So now we are moving to the Model Forest Network. And this is, if you don't know what the International Model Forest Network is, it's a really incredible initiative spearheaded by Canada. And I think you can correct me, Max, but it's something like 60 model forests globally and millions of hectares and really demonstrating what sustainable landscape management looks like on the ground. And it's been really interesting to interact with the International Model Forest Network in the development of the Fire Hub, because we've talked a lot about actually, demonstrating many of these integrated fire management activities in these model forests. And so I think there's a lot of potential to do that. So I'm very happy to invite Max Yamuchi-Levy he's leading the Latin America Model Forest Network from Eco-Agricultural Partners, and I think talking a lot about restoration as well and post-fire recovery. So Max, over to you. Yep.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Amy and all the colleagues. Really interesting, Luke and André. I think myself, I will try to bring a little bit the discussion to a lower level, to the landscape level, to the local level. And I would like to bring a little bit of this discussion on how we can integrate a little more of the fire agenda into a broader landscape agenda. So just to ground a little bit the discussion, when we're talking about model forests, we're really talking about an integrated landscape management approach, right? Integrated landscape approaches, where basically what we promote is to bring different stakeholders together from the landscape, from the territory. We have local government, we have traditional communities, we have universities, we have private sector, all in the same table, and really trying to reconcile their goals, understand each other's interests, and really try to find a common pathway, shared vision for this territory, for this landscape. So next slide. But we are doing this integrated work with this landscape perspective. So with this place-based approach, understanding that it is needed to really ground our perspective on the real contextualized systems on the ground, what is happening in each case. Next, please. So this is probably the most common kind of illustration of what we promote, integrated landscape management. A different group of stakeholders, interest groups around a table, trying to negotiate and understand each other's interests around a map, which is their landscape. Next one. And basically, this is what the Latin American Model Forest Network, the International Model Forest Network have been promoting for more than 20, 30 years, right? So you can see in this map, we have more than 30 landscapes, each landscape ranging from 70,000 hectares to sometimes 1 million, 2 million hectares of area in more than 15 countries on Latin America. And I would like to next bring this question to the table. So where does fire sit in this table? So I would like to bring this reflection, the importance of understanding that fire is another agenda in a set of different interests of a landscape. So it's really important when we talk about governance, fire management and fire governance, to understand that it needs to be aligned and discussed with the other sectors, with the other interests, with the other priorities. Because once we are able to align the fire agenda into the common shared goals of a landscape, it will be much easier to engage the different stakeholders, be in agriculture, traditional communities, private sectors, to really work in the same direction. So just to bring some quick examples from our network, in the Pantanal region, in the west part of the Pantanal, Corumbá, we have the Pantanal, they call themselves Pantanal Model Landscape. It's around 70,000 hectares. And the idea here is that when they bring these different stakeholders, people from, again, from the mining sector, but also from the traditional communities, from local governments, environmental agencies, when they have quality governance, next please, when they have quality governance, they are able to build quality action on the ground, align the action on the ground, really building action for prevention, to control fires, but also working with environmental education, awareness of fire, and restoration. Next one, please. So as you can see, they involve indigenous, traditional communities on different parts of the fire management process, from prevention to post-fire restoration. Next one, please. And here are some of the examples of how their actions are being led on the ground, working with fire management and post-fire restoration. Again, fire brigades on the floor. Next one. Another example is coming from Bolivia. As maybe some of you know, Bolivia in the Chiquitania region, the dry forest that really borders with the Pantanal, have really had huge wildfires in the last years. And again, there they are building quality governance. And when they're building quality governance, next please, they again are building quality, coherent, systemic action, fire aligned to other interests on the ground, right? So here are some examples of prescribed fire burns, also productive restoration processes, post-fire, and capacity strengthening with communities on fire brigades. Next one. These are some of the pictures that shows some of the engagement with the local communities, local authorities, really aligning governance with different levels of decision-making, from national levels, regional levels, to also the municipal levels. Communities, municipalities, all agreeing on how to really deal strategically with fire. Next one. Fire is not only environment, it's not only damage on infrastructure, but it's also related to health. So they also discuss this a lot, how is impacting the local communities, and they have all this process to really consider this aspect, how the processes, how the fires are impacting health on the communities. Another picture of brigades that were prepared through capacity building process with equipment. And finally, the last model forest, and when I say model forest, please translate to landscape. It's a landscape working with integrated management, integrated governance. Again, quality governance, next one, leads to quality action, leads to coherent action on the ground. And here is an example in this picture. They have a really interesting learnings and really interesting experiences of really engaging with youth on the fire control monitoring processes. Using drones, for example, they really bring the new generations. They are interested in technology and monitoring, so they are the ones who are actually leading the whole fire and prevention preventive alert system. But we cannot also forget lots of work on environmental education, community population awareness, bringing them to understand the complexity of fire management and the need to prevent them. And finally, also the advanced, really interesting prevention support systems, monitoring, using definitely lots of data, satellite images, and so on. But yeah, and some other examples of really how they are dealing with restoration as well. I think this was the last one. Okay, so I think the final message of this is basically that fire is a landscape issue, and if you're not like really grounding in the landscape level, understanding the nuances of each landscape, of the context, and really putting this in the table with the other sectors, with the other interests, you probably won't have, you have a less opportunity to tackle systemically this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, it's really nice examples, and I mean, I think what's so interesting about this model forest network is taking these very local examples and then actually being able to share them, you know, in many different geographies. So it's great that you're also working on fire in this context, because this is exactly what we were trying to do with the Fire Hub. I know that Luke has to leave. The negotiations are getting tough, and you're key in Australia's side. But maybe if you could just leave us with one takeaway, well, two takeaways. One, you know, what do you think has been key to enabling Australia's work on integrated fire management and all of these advances that you've seen? And then maybe second, where do you see the value of international cooperation?
Yeah, great. So in terms of the first question, what do I see in terms of...
The main thing that's enabled Australia's
Well, I think that it's part of, I mean, the fact that we've had a lot of these series of quite bad fires, quite horrific ones, so there's a lot of community support. I think that that's something that's really grown over the last few decades, is that it's a bipartisan issue, which means that you have the political will and buy-in from both sides of politics to try, and especially, obviously, the 2019 was like the most recent inflection, but there's been a lot of points before that. So I think the political will is really important, and not just from the national level, but also subnational governments, which has helped. We still rely, by and large, on voluntary fire services, which is often the same people who are doing a lot of the fire addressing the fires on the land, and they often can get burnt out very quickly. So being able to upskill and be able to have a sort of a broader sort of workforce or potential workforce, people who are like reserve firefighters who can jump into that has also been a critical part, because these often last for so long. So I'm not sure if it answers it, but I would say certainly having the political will and having it also the we could say that the social sort of respect in terms of firefighters, particularly over the last few decades, have been elevated in terms of within this Australian society as something that you should do. So especially in a lot of local communities, there's a lot of buy-in for youths as well as people, in addition to their jobs, to be involved in this and to even within urban situations to take ownership for clearing your house and your gutters around and ensuring that there's this preventative sort of action. So at the same time, I can talk about all the top-down stuff. I think there's also a lot of bottom-up legitimacy work around that. In terms of the second one, around international cooperation, so I know that we have done some with North America, particularly. Obviously, it's tricky because so we did have, and I know we've sent particularly supplies and capacity building, that's somewhere where we can, but fire season, which used to be in Australia a very defined period, has really over the last decade, it's changed. So now it's really, because I mean for much of Australia, for the southern part it's Mediterranean, so we do have 4 seasons. The centre's desert, the north is tropical rainforest, so it's either the wet season or it's the dry season. The dry season's in winter when the rest, so in some ways fire season is almost all of the year. So there's politically it's difficult to send fire people, a finite resource overseas. It's politically quite difficult, but technology in terms of capacity building, I know we have been working, so with the California bushfires, I know there's some support for that. I know in Chile, which is obviously where I'm working, there's has been historically around capacity building and providing some different tech, but particularly I think the capacity building around some of this preparedness is where we've often worked in the space and where we can do some work. This year we did a number of sort of capacity building webinars in the region where I've been working across sort of Latin America. these are some areas. It's tricky though because we still don't have a huge fire workforce in terms of that, and at the same time as there's, I will just say in terms of the political will to focus more on it, there's also less of the political will to send those resources or people in particular overseas. But kits, technology and capacity is an area which we can start to work a bit more and also learn from other countries which are going through the same things that we're going through. So Canada is it's a similar, and maybe it's different landscapes, but there is a lot of lessons learning. And as like I said, we don't have all the answers, and it's only an issue which is going to get worse. So and which is changing. So what we knew about a few decades ago isn't the same. The patterns of the fires are changing in more volatile ways in different periods. So I hope that kind of gives a bit of a sense.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So Luke, I know you have to go, but wait, I need a photo with these three guys before he leaves. So let's just take our photo, and then you're free. If someone, yeah, Christian, thank you. Thank you. Don't worry, yeah. Thank you. So, but okay, now we turn to Andre, who also might have to run. So I need to get them before they run away. So the same questions, Andre, for you. First, what do you think in Brazil has been, the key enabling factor for this, especially for the policy and the implementation of the policy? And then the second would be, how do you see this role of international cooperation in helping you do your job?
Well, in the first question, I think that the climate changing is the most important issue that we are all in Brazil are feeling and are suffering. So, are demanding a strong action, and also our president Lula, since before he was elected, and he defended. He proposed a zero deforestation target in Brazil, and we are able and we are seeking this target. But if we don't work to prevent fire, we will achieve zero deforestation, but the forests will go away. So we have a strong political willing to face this problem from the president. Marina Silva, our ministry, is totally sensible for this problem, and she lived for many years in the forest, and she knows the so hard that is to face this the forest fire. So she's also supporting a lot and demanding a lot from our team, and we have also a very qualified team that has lots of experience, and we are really working in a coordination team. Not only the Minister of Environment, here we have Garo Batimani and our coordinator of the Brazilian Forest Service that are engaged in this, because he has lots to lose if we don't make a good job. The forest concessions in Brazil are very in risk if we don't work. All the ministry, the Minister of the Health, the Minister of the Defense. So we are really having a good success working coordination in Brazil, and also the society is demanding on us a lot. The media is covering this issue as never before. So the time is now, So that's why we are achieving good results in so short period of time. And also the international coordination, this participation in the global fire hub, it's really important to know what you are doing in all around the world. So we have all other countries that are very ahead of us, working with more experience than us. We also have experience to share with you. The technologies are going very fast. We have here a friend, Osmar, who works with 1.5 degree. He is working with a very interesting company. So to share this challenge all around the world is very incredible, and we need to do that more and better. And you help us very much on that.
Thank you. And I think this, both of the speakers really, this political will. I mean, this is really such an incredible, it's so always important, frankly. And I think you see this, Brazil's leadership of the call to action on integrated fire management and wildfire resilience. I mean, 62 countries endorsing this. This is really, I keep saying it, but it's just no small thing. I mean, to get countries from across the world to agree on this kind of text and to come around together, and a lot of that is because there was such confidence in Brazil's approach and leadership and know-how on this issue, so it made it much easier, in fact, to come on board around this. And now we just have to really implement it all together. So thank you for that. And maybe now I finally turn over to Max, and just from your perspective, I mean, it's a very different perspective from the landscape level, but what is enabling your work, maybe in the region more broadly, not just in Brazil, but in the region more broadly, and where do you see this aspect of international cooperation around the fire issue? Thanks.
Thanks so much, Amy. I would say that one of the main challenges working with landscapes and landscape governance is that on the ground it's really hard to find support for integrated management or governance. It's really what I see on the ground very often is that the different interest groups or the landscape leaders, they just can't meet. They just can't talk to each other because they don't have any kind of support to really build this collaboration, landscape partnerships, governance platforms. These are always the last thing to be supported, financed in different, levels of financing, actually. So what I see often is that everybody's very worried with numbers, number of trees, number of hectares, but nobody wants to support coordination, people really negotiating, reconciling, and this is what is needed to really tackle these structural challenges on the ground. I mean, like, in the end, you have to coordinate with people, you will need to negotiate, and if you can't find these spaces and structure them, it will always be working in silos, one sector here, the other sector there, and if the international cooperation, national governments don't support this kind of agenda of integrated landscape management, like the model forests, it's just, I would say, would be, as always, fragmented work.
Great. Thank you so much. Maybe we have any time for comments from the audience before we close this session. We do have also a very Cacique Gabriel here from Panama, who's been sitting here listening, very involved in the Indigenous-led Fire Adaptation Network. And Dane, thank you so much for staying and for your contributions. Any thoughts from the audience before we close? Yes, Humberto, good.
Good morning. I'm Humberto Gomez from Tropembos Internacional. Beside political will and beside money, yeah, because that is going to be the immediate answer, what else can we do to have more pictures about people negotiating, taking decisions, monitoring, and less people with uniforms fighting on fires? Yeah, because we say that prevention, preparation is important. We say that is key. But every time we have more and more and more response and not so much all these spaces. So what we can do in order to move the balance a little bit, or at least to balance a little more the different steps of the integrated fire management. Thank you.
Good question. What we are doing in Brazil is working with this, what we call integrated fire management plan in different scales. We are working on a state scale, but also in local level, work with groups of rural landowners. We are working with indigenous territory, traditional people territory. And so we need to work with the municipalities, the local government. So we are working with a multi-level kind of planning, bottom to up. We need to develop, improve, and multiplicates local communities, resilient local communities, resilient fire local communities. This is what we are investing in Brazil, from bottom to up. And the federal government, the political willing is very important to guarantee the governance, the coordination of all the different levels, and also the money, as you have said.
Just very quickly to your question, I think it's key. So if we're not talking about money, I would say that one of the main gaps I see of doing this integrated work on the ground, landscape work, it's related to capacity. And when I say capacity, it's not related technical capacity of fire management specifically. It's really capacity to coordinate, to integrate, to drive dialogues, facilitate. Unfortunately, we don't have professionals because of the paradigm system that we build a society in silos. People are not prepared to drive dialogues, to drive negotiations, to facilitate this participatory process from the ground up. So we need this kind of professionals in every sector that really knows that this is needed, this integrative process that really can build this permanent landscape platforms that can, drive this bottom-up needs coherently from the bottom up. But I would say that this kind of capacities is lacking. Like, you go to the ground and people just get scared when they talk about governance platform, facilitating. It's like, oh, I just know how to do the checklist here. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Oh, another question in the back. Yes.
Actually, it's not a question, just a brief comment that I'm very happy to see what is happening in this COP, that fire was mostly marginal around other COPs, and it's mainstream right now. We're gaining traction, and also I see that all around the panels are speaking the same thing. So a couple of years ago, we were discussing if private burning was good, if it was bad, people were against, but now I think we are on the same page. Everybody's in the same page, and I'm very happy that I see that it's building, this fire agenda is building, so maybe we can reduce fire by building this agenda. Congratulations, André, and for you too, for all your in this agenda. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Oh, good. Suddenly we go. Okay, here. Yes. Too many.
Sí, muy buenos días. Mi nombre es Gabriel Menguizama, el cacique general de Tierra Colectiva en Baunán de Panamá. Soy de la etnia Emberá, ubicado en el sur de Panamá, un país muy pequeño, bien pequeños. Nosotros aquí, en este caso, mi persona, estoy representando a la Coordinadora Nacional de los Pueblos Indígenas, de las 7 etnias que existe a nivel de Panamá, y la 12 estructura a nivel del país. Significa que habíamos 12 autoridades. Sí quiero, antes de hacer como unas preguntas, quiero intervenir un poco. Primero, decirle lo que antecedieron en antes. Creo que como pueblos indígenas, si fuera sido los pueblos indígenas, no estuviéramos hablando hoy de este tema, de cómo evitar los incendios a nivel del país o a nivel del mundo. Porque nosotros como pueblos indígenas mantenemos el equilibrio del bosque. Somos los conservacionistas a nivel del mundo. Sabemos, porque nuestro legado es tener esa vivencia entre la naturaleza y la parte nuestra como pueblos indígenas, por la cual no afectamos en la deforestación y mucho menos en las grandes industrias que hacen los países. Solo que yo quiero...
Sorry, I'm just going to do a very bad translation here, but it's important just because the translation's not working. This is Gabriel Mingisama from he's the general cacique from the Embera and Wanan populations in Central America, and he's reflecting on this issue of indigenous peoples maintaining equilibrium in ecosystems and sort of the natural conservationists and seeing that this is out of balance and what they're coming with is something more balanced.
Sí, entonces yo recargo igual a los que han sido líderes, el incendio no lo ha provocado los pueblos indígenas, sino la devastación de grande escala, de las grandes ganaderías en caso de nuestro país, ¿sí? Entonces yo creo que es bastante preocupante, pero quiero entrar en detalles en este caso de Panamá. Es un país pequeño. Hablamos de estos temas a nivel internacional con ayuda de organizaciones que están enfocados de que esto vayamos a tener un control de cómo podamos subsanar o mejorar sobre estos temas. Pero lo que pasa es que a nivel de estos, en verdaderamente estos rubros que hablamos en los proyectos y programas a nivel internacional, cuando llegan a las diferentes organizaciones no llegan al destino. Porque en Panamá se habla de estos temas, pero son personas que no tienen realmente el aval de la representación total de esos 7 congresos, de esos 7 pueblos y las 12 estructuras a nivel nacional. Entonces eso queda arriba. ¿Qué significa? Mientras las organizaciones o gobiernos nos coordinen directamente a donde tenemos que ir, siempre seguiremos hablando de control de fuego, de incendio, porque realmente no llega a los verdaderos poblaciones a donde deben llegarse, sino más bien creemos de personas que realmente no tienen ese don de mando en las comunidades. Entonces, en Panamá hay una estructura formada, las coordinadoras nacionales, el que representa a nivel nacional, aglutina las 12 estructuras. Si estas organizaciones coordinaran con esta instancia, sí debemos tener resultados. Resultados porque va directamente a la base, que es las comunidades y congresos locales y autoridades que son los caciques generales. Entonces,
Again, just very brief parentheses on this, and I won't translate completely. I hope you understand the Spanish because it's much richer than what I'm going to say. But this importance of all of these discussions and actions at the international level, how they actually translate to the national level, and that often they're going to the source, what's not really the representative of the indigenous voices in the country. And he's speaking about Panama in particular, and how many of those who are actually leading associations on the ground are not really being represented through these processes, and that what they've done is had a formal coordination at the national level in Panama to try to resolve this and get the correct representation at the right level.
Lo otro es que quería también expresarle, sí hay un cambio, porque también lo hemos vivido, lo sabemos que el daño cada día va expandiendo, porque nuestras poblaciones, los ríos, el aire, todo han sido afectadas. Los ríos crecen, bajan, pero asimismo también cuando el sol cae, seca inmediatamente los ríos, y ríos que antes no se secaban, hoy en día se quedan totalmente secas, intransitables, porque si se utiliza por esa vía va a tener que caminar en el caso de Panamá. ¿Qué significa? Que hay un cambio de esa forma de la deforestación que se han llevado. Ahora, ¿dónde quiero llegar aquí? Se escucha a nivel del país, del mundo, en todas las instancias de organizaciones, que Panamá no es elegible para desarrollar programas o proyectos. Pero es una lástima cuando uno escucha versiones de esta, donde realmente los pueblos indígenas de Panamá lo hemos vivido históricamente de generación en generación en la misma situación. En Panamá todavía la población indígena sufre, hablan de recursos, hablan de proyectos, pero eso no llega directamente a la base de los pueblos donde estamos asentados. Pero es lastimosamente escuchar que en Panamá, en otras palabras, como que no hay pobrezas. Sí hay pobreza, sí hay necesidades, solo que quedan arriba las versiones de decir, hicimos esto en los pueblos indígenas, pero en las prácticas, tanto gobiernos o otras instancias de organizaciones que no coordinan con autoridades, eso no llega a la base. Esto queda acá. Y es lastimoso cuando se escucha esta clase de presiones a nivel del mundo de estos países que realmente, como Panamá, realmente esos recursos no llegan. Entonces, ¿cuál sería? Yo quisiera hacer esa pregunta aquí a la estimada. ¿Cuál sería la respuesta si Panamá no es elegible? Si estamos hablando sobre este tema, ¿cuál sería el mecanismo que se va a utilizar? Que también es importante hablar sobre esto. Tenemos que ver de cómo podamos nosotros tener esa coordinación y también lograr de llevar estos programas y proyectos que es de suma importancia. Y otra de las cosas, esa era la pregunta, pero se me escapa algo. Nosotros sí queremos que las legalizaciones territoriales sean nuestras, porque ahí está el control nuestro, ¿sí? Pero los gobiernos no quieren dar las seguridad territoriales jurídicas. Más sin embargo, estamos hablando de estos temas, como que ya no hay otros temas que hablar de interés para los pueblos indígenas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. And he's really emphasizing how these kinds of damages are just increasing, not only with fires, but also droughts and rivers in their territories that are drying up that has never happened before, and really talking about, you know, that a lot of the poverty and in indigenous territories still, and that the resources from all of these projects just simply don't arrive where they need to at the base, and the importance of coordinated mechanisms to ensure that this changes, but that also, you know, territorial security for indigenous peoples, which we've heard very much at this COP, including with the big declarations of how important tenure security is, territorial rights are for climate action led by indigenous peoples. I'm sorry about that, you know, making something so rich, so basic, but thank you so much. And I think we would like to open it more, but we will have to close. Thank you for being here, but for those who are still around, you're welcome to interact still. Get a coffee and then come back, because IUCN is leading another session on fire, on primary forests and fire, and safeguarding primary forests in a fiery world. So that will start at 12 o'clock here. Thank you so much.
Eu espero que sim.
Tá.
I know it's the 12 p.m. session, so people will still come gradually as they finish the other sessions, but really appreciate everyone who is here. Welcome to this session on safeguarding primary forests in a world of growing threats, a call for global stewardship. My name is Chetan Kumar, and I lead the IUCN's Forest and Grassland team, and I'll be your moderator for today. So it's a privilege to have a very distinguished panel. Before I invite them, let me provide you a little bit of context of why we are organizing this session and also what we are going to cover in this session. So primary forests, as most of you know, hold irreplaceable biodiversity, provide essential ecosystem services, and offer some of the most effective ecosystem-based strategies for climate mitigation and adaptation. They are also fundamental to human health and well-being. Yet, these ecosystems are under growing pressure, including wildfires, which is the focus of the session today, and which today burn almost twice as much tree cover each year as they did 2 years ago. So today's side event is part of our broader collective effort, and I would like to acknowledge the support from the International Model Forest Network, Canada, Global Environment Facility, and several of our partners, some of whom will be in the panel today, to keep the primary forests at the center of global action, but also drawing on partnership-based and IPLC's, Indigenous People and local communities anchored approaches that strengthen the protection and long-term stewardship. So through this collaboration, what we are doing is advancing policies, partnership, and practical solutions, and generating evidence that is very much needed to safeguard these irreplaceable ecosystems. So as I said, we have a fantastic panel of scientists, IPLC representatives, government representatives, NGOs, and regional networks. This mix of panelists will reflect on why and what is required, evidence, community experience, and what's needed to move forward. So the way we have organized today's session is that I will ask each panelist a brief question to draw their perspective. They will either respond here from the stage or have a presentation, and then we will open the floor for questions and answers. Our aim is simple today, to focus on what is working, what needs to change, and how we can accelerate action to safeguard these forests. So now it is my pleasure to invite our distinguished panelists. Let me start with Brendan McKay, Director, Griffith Climate Action, Beacon at Griffith University, Queensland, Australia. Ms. Annie Alan Carr, Science Director at Amazon Environmental Research Institute, EPAM, and part of the MAP Biomas Fire, Brazil. Megan Masters, the Deputy Director, Multilateral Affairs, Canada. Pleasure to have you. Then we have Natalia Calderon, Executive Director of Friends of Nature Foundation, Bolivia. Pleasure to have you, Natalia. And Mario Escobedo, Forest and Biodiversity Coordinator at the Central American Commission on Environment and Development, CICAD of SICA. And we also have Puir Tembe, First Secretary of Indigenous People of the state of Pará. So what I will do now, because Puir has to leave after her remark, so I'll invite Puir to give an opening remark. Particularly, as I said, we will start with the IPLC focus. And I would like to invite Puir to talk about particularly the Indigenous Embassy and Kihao Idza, I hope I got the pronunciation right, Para project, and how it is helping to protect the primary forest. And Puir, if you could also share with us what could be done to scale this up. So Puir, floor is yours.
Obrigada, bom dia a todos e a todas, bom dia à mesa, aqui aos colegas que estão, as mulheres, aos homens.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say good morning for everybody who is here, everybody in the table, the women and the men who is here. Thank you so much.
Bom, como todo mundo sabe, a COP já estamos chegando na reta final e ela já está se preparando para ir para uma outra direção.
As everybody knows, the COP is about to finish and it's prepared itself to go to another direction.
E com essa nova direção que a COP está indo, a gente precisa pensar o pós-COP, né? O que a gente vai fazer depois dessa COP, sobretudo aqui no Pará, no Brasil e no mundo, né?
And with this new direction, we must think what we're going to do after COP. In the post-COP, what we're going to do here in Belém, in Pará, and in the rest of the world.
E a gente quer seguir com o legado da COP. Eu acho que a gente precisa, todo mundo fazer a sua parte, seguir trabalhando, seguir reflorestando as mentes.
And we want to go forward with the legacy of COP and keep doing our job, keep doing the restoration of the minds. That's a concept of Indigenous people to trying to reshape the mind of non-Indigenous people here in Brazil and outside in the world.
A COP, como todo mundo sabe, é do conhecimento dos senhores e senhoras. Nós tivemos aqui a COP do Brasil a maior e melhor participação de povos indígenas. Isso ficou na história.
The COP here in Brazil, as you know, it was the biggest and the best opportunity for Indigenous people inside the COP. So it was the COP with the most important participation of Indigenous people.
Com essa maior e melhor participação de povos indígenas nessa COP, contando com 900 indígenas na Zona Azul, isso significa que nós somos as soluções dessas florestas primárias.
And as you know, we had more than 900 Indigenous people here inside in the Blue Zone in COP. And as we are the best, and as in this best and the biggest participation of Indigenous people here in COP, we demonstrated how Indigenous people are part of the solution for climate crisis.
E com isso eu gostaria de apresentar um pouco do nosso trabalho, do que a gente está falando, do que é essa embaixada, né? Porque todos os países têm as suas embaixadas. A gente está trazendo um outro conceito de embaixada que queremos para o nosso Brasil.
And because of that, I would like to present for you our embassy of Indigenous people, this Indigenous embassy, as all the countries have their own embassies. Indigenous people also need ours.
Com essa iniciativa, uma embaixada aqui, como legado dessa COP30, uma embaixada em São Paulo e outra em Minas Gerais.
In this initiative, as a legacy of COP30, we would like to build an embassy, an Indigenous embassy here in Belém, another one in Belo Horizonte, in Minas Gerais, and the other one in São Paulo, in the state of São Paulo.
Isso, o que é isso? É um espaço de articulação entre movimentos urbanos, né, rurais e da floresta, para a formação política e intercâmbio cultural com foco na proteção dos territórios indígenas.
So what is this? This is a space of articulation between indigenous movement, people from the cities, people from the camp, people from the forest, to do an intercultural exchange and political formation.
Porque é um espaço físico, essa embaixada para receber todo esse público e a gente seguir reflorestando as mentes. A gente entende que reflorestar os territórios, manter a floresta em pé, a floresta viva, as florestas primárias é necessário, mas nada mais é necessário do que a mentalidade das pessoas e o coração.
It will be a physical spot, a physical place for we trying to do this articulation, and the main goal is trying to do the restoration of the mind. And what does it mean? The restoration of the mind is trying to help non-Indigenous people to rethink about Earth, about the relationship with the nature, because it's pretty important to have the restoration of the forest, but it is also important to do this restoration in the mind of non-Indigenous people.
Porque sabemos a necessidade, a nossa tradicionalidade de manter as florestas em pé, viva, mas a sociedade precisa compreender e fazer o seu papel e mudar a sua concepção, o seu jeito, o seu modo de pensar sobre o meio ambiente.
Because we already know how important it is to keep the forest alive, to keep the forest stand up, but we also need to convince non-Indigenous people that how important it is to be done.
E só o reflorestar Mentes é capaz de sensibilizar uma sociedade, sensibilizar os segmentos, sensibilizar aí as cidades, as grandes capitais, porque não basta só os povos indígenas cuidar. É preciso que o planeta esteja junto, as pessoas estejam junto conosco.
And just the restoration of mind is going to be able to engage people, engage non-indigenous people in this task that is fundamental, because just indigenous people cannot support on this. We need the support of the cities, of the camp, of all people around the world.
E esse lugar é um lugar de tomadas de decisões, de proposições de lideranças, garantir a participação de lideranças indígenas hoje em lugares da governança, né, na sociedade civil, enfim. Eu acho que é um conjunto que faz a sociedade civil, mas também empodera os povos indígenas que estão ocupando lugares de gestão.
And the Indigenous Embassy will be a place created and run by civil society, and also to articulate the participation of people in positions of taking decisions, people in NGOs, people that can go to the administration, the public administration, and try to engage with as much as people as we can.
Bom, e concluindo, a gente tem vários eixos, né? O projeto traz os eixos que a gente está falando, que é essa rede aqui no estado do Pará, tem a embaixada e tem a rede nas 8 etno-regiões que o Pará já trabalha, e a embaixada vai trabalhar nessa rede de diálogo com a sociedade civil.
In concluding, we have a lot of different axes of actions there, and it is here in Pará is divided in the micro regions of Pará. And we are addressing how to work in partnership with all of these shareholders.
Os povos indígenas do Pará, do lugar de onde eu falo, são parte da solução climática. Já são guardiões e precisam de apoio de parceiros para ampliar a luta.
The indigenous people here in Pará, from where I'm talking about, they are already guardians of the forests, of the nature. And we are part of the solution, and we need the support of everybody that is involved, every partnership potential who is willing to work with us.
Não podemos ser parte sozinha dessa mudança.
We cannot be part just by ourselves here in solitude. We cannot be just the change by ourselves. We need these partnerships.
É preciso ter a corrente humanitária, todo mundo junto, para a gente mudar o cenário que hoje estamos no planeta.
It's necessary to have a humanitarian chain, we all together to change and do the changes necessary in the planet.
Só vamos conseguir vencer a emergência climática, essas mudanças climáticas, se todos nós estivermos unidos na unidade, no reflorestar mentes.
So we just will be able to overcome this climate crisis here if we be together, united in this objective of restoration of minds.
O projeto quer plantar, sim. Quer reflorestar, sim. Mas queremos combater a guerra, a fome, a pobreza.
This project we want to plant, yes, want to restore, yes, but we also want to face the war, the hungry, the poorness.
Queremos combater a violência contra as mulheres.
We would like to face the violence against women.
Queremos empoderar os nossos jovens.
We would like to empower our young people.
E queremos combater o ódio no mundo.
And we would like to face the hate in the world.
Queremos plantar amor.
We want to plant love.
Plantar a paz.
Plant peace.
A solidariedade.
Solidarity.
E plantar um mundo melhor.
And plant a better world.
Para quem está hoje e para quem vai vir amanhã.
For who is here now and who is coming tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Puyer. Thank you very much. Thank you again. There's so many things to recap from what you just said. Of course, you highlighted what stood out for me was the clear and consistent message about the custodians. I mean, you also highlighted the work you're doing on restoration, but of course, as we have been discussing, protection comes first. And certainly the important aspect of partnership, we cannot protect these important forests without this kind of partnership that we have. So it's really, really important, and thank you very much for sharing information about the Indigenous Embassy. As I said, we have quite a distinguished panel here, and we will go into some of the details of what else is needed, and where we start is first and foremost understanding what are the threats to these primary forests. And particularly as today's theme of the day is on fire, or fires, so I would like to invite Brendan to talk about how we can reliably monitor threats to the primary forest, including the forest fires. Also, particularly in terms of how that could be useful for policy. And I would like to request all the panelists, in the interest of time, keep your interventions focused on the question and the examples that the audience would like to hear. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So if I could have the slide, please. So I'm going to answer this question by showing you a case study here in the Amazon. This is the territory of the Kayapo Tribal Alliance. It's 9 million hectares of the Amazon, larger than Ireland, larger than Scotland. And you can see in that left-hand side, it's been protected from fire, it's been protected from logging, it's been protected from clearing. What you see there is a result of satellite analysis, a 20-year time series of showing you where fire has occurred over the last 20 years and other human disturbances, including forest loss and related issues. So the first part of your question is very simply, this satellite data provides us with very fine resolution, accurate data about where these human impacts are. And we know fire in the Amazon is a human-related impact because the primary forest has a closed canopy which maintains a moist microclimate, forest interior climate, which is not flammable. So when we log and open up and otherwise degrade the forest canopy, that results in desiccation and the flammability of the fire, of the forest. It makes it burnable. So our research here, we worked very closely with the Kayapo Tribal Alliance over a 4-year period to understand what are the capabilities and capacities they have that have enabled them to protect 9 million hectares of the Amazon. It hasn't happened by accident. It's been the result of a very dedicated program of work they have led. And I've listed those factors on the right-hand side. The first foundation is they have uncontested constitutional territory rights. The second is they have a very strong culture. The Kayapo tribal culture unites the tribes. They form 3 non-government organisations, so they have very strong institutional capacity. Because of their institutional and governance capacity, they've got very effective planning. Their democratic decision-making means they have equitable benefit sharing amongst the tribes. The resources and training have been there to establish guard posts and patrols, which have been concretely important in terms of identifying and preventing illegal incursions. And they've also developed micro-enterprises, non-extractive micro-enterprises, which have provided an income stream. So the data that the satellite monitoring provides gives them the evidence that they can show governments and to NGOs and to society at large that what they're doing works, and provides them with the data and evidence to be able to monitor and report on the good work they're doing. So that, in a nutshell, in a Brazilian nutshell, is the answer to your question.
Thank you, Brendan. Thanks again for showing them. As I always say, maps say 1,000 words, and this is a really powerful map. And you know, as you mentioned, what I said right in the beginning, that our focus of the session is to understand what works. And this is a good example of what works. You can have all the ingredients, rights, governance, partnership, supported with the data. That makes things really work. So thank you, Brendan, for sharing the insight. We will continue to focus on the data and evidence. So now it is my pleasure to invite Annie to talk about the MAP Biomass Fire Initiative and how it is being used to support policies to protect forest fires.
Thank you. So, how many of you heard about MAP Biomass? Raise your hand. So, how many of you heard about MAP Biomass Fire? Okay, good. So the ones that don't know, you know a little bit today. So, well, we cannot actually do something about it if we don't know the extent of the problem. So in this case, we are working with the network of MAP Biomas to expand to, how do I, can I? Yeah. Well, first of all, MAP Biomas is a network of institutions that got together to produce local maps with local knowledge. And this is a very key thing, because you have Natalia here, which is part also like fun, is part of work. We are in, I think, 16 countries, but we have a mission, like a target, to expand to 70% of the tropics. And MAP Biomas started in Brazil, and MAP Biomas Fire started in Brazil in 2020. Now we are going to our 5th collection. So this is just a perspective of where we are now. So in our days, we have a collection for Brazil, Indonesia. Last month, we just launched Peru and Paraguay. And by next year, we are intending to have the entire South America. We already gave some training and capacity building for some of the other countries. And the idea here is actually to have local data being produced by local people. And that makes all the difference, because I don't know what is going on in Bolivia, only by curiosity, but Natalia and Fan can get those maps and actually do something about it. And just to show you what we have, so I will pass really fast on the products so you can have an idea. So this is what we release every year. We have about 206 million hectares burned in Brazil, so you know the extent. We know where it happens more. We know that, for example, the Amazon that shouldn't burn is one of the most, the second biome most burned in Brazil. Can you pass more? We know by annual, we have these annual figures for each one of the biomes, and we can see the ups and downs, and we can see what we can actually do about it, and when actually climate plays a bigger role. Can you pass? We know, for example, in terms of fire properties, the frequency and fire recurrency is very important, and you can know, for example, that the Amazon should have a curve just like Mata Atlântica, which is a forest-based ecosystem, but our curve, fire frequency curve, is even worse than the Cerrado, which means that we are very off of what would be our natural fire recurrence rates. Can you pass, please? We also know what is burning more. I mean, if it's forests, savanna ecosystems, pasture fields, and for example, you can see very clearly that the pizzas for the Amazon and the Mata Atlântica, which are forest-dominated biomes, most of the fires, this is an average of 40 years, so most of the fires are happening in land use areas. But the other biomes which are fire dependent or tolerant, such as Cerrado, Caatinga, Pantanal, Pampa, most of the area burned yearly are like grasslands or savanna type of ecosystems. Can you pass, please? With this data, we also know like when these fires are happening, so we can have a sense of the seasonality of the data, and if the seasonality is changing over time. Can you pass, please? We can also know the size of the burned area, so we can see how mega fires are evolving over time. Can you pass, please? We can also know the time since the last fire, so we can see where are the frontiers of the fire. And you can see very clearly in the Cerrado, in the Amazon, in red, where fire happened in the last years. Can you pass, please? Now, just focus a little bit on the Amazon, and this was the forest fires concentration, only forest fires concentration in Brazil in 2024. In 2024, we had 30 million hectares burned in Brazil. This is 64% above the average. And we have, from this, we have about 9 million hectares burned in forest, standing forest, and 7 million were in the Amazon. Can you pass, please? So we have this size, and the area that he showed, the Caiapó, is actually right here in this region here. So you see it was very much affected. In fact, one of the worst indigenous territories affected by wildfires in 2024. Can you pass, please? You can click. Yeah, sorry about that. But you can see the difference in the average pizza by land use change, and you can see in 2024. So the climate really played a huge role in expanding those fires. And just getting to the policy to finish, can you pass, please? We think, and sorry, it's in Portuguese, we just released a report that we spent 1 year going to every single state in the Amazon, trying to understand how they actually do fire management. What are the pieces that they have there? And we believe that these three elements are like main axes that we need to take into account, like fire intelligence, the governance and management of fire, and the fire control, prevention and control strategies. Can you pass, please? So this generated this report. We did several interactions with states, and we did an interaction together, which was really rich. And I'm going to tell you why. Can you pass, please? We have, in Brazil, the agencies, they deal with fire, they manage fire in a different way. So in the green are all the private properties that are actually linked with firefighters in the states. And the other areas are actually related to federal lands, so which are like a responsibility of the ICMBio or the federal agencies. So sometimes they need to work together, but there is some difficulty on this. So to finish, the articulation of the institutions, I would say, is one of the most important things, and also the articulation with people on the ground, like the brigades, like local brigades, community brigades, voluntary brigades, private brigades. So this, for me, this is one of the biggest challenge in the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. That's fantastic. And this is the first time I'm seeing these slides. Amazing work. As you, from Brendan to transitioning to you, you zoomed out at the Amazon and showed us the extent of problem. I think what stood out for me was particularly the emphasis on the local data that you emphasize. Also, as you ended with this working together, articulation working together with several stakeholders, data is as useful as it can be used by the stakeholders. Otherwise, it stays in on the maps and the publication. So I have a follow-up question for you, but I'll hold it for till I finish with other panelists. Megan, from Amazon to Canada, could you talk about the Canada's approach to integrated forest fire management, particularly with the aspect of Indigenous people and traditional practices?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here to talk about this issue, which is of great importance to Canada. I promise to stay on point, but I will start with a little bit of context. Canada is home to 367 million hectares of trees. So this is approximately 9% of the world's total forested area, and 3/4 of that is boreal forest, which is a landscape, as we all know, is shaped by fire. So most of Canada's forests are publicly owned. Approximately 225 million hectares are what we consider managed forests. So they're subject to human intervention. That could be for forestry, water supply, conservation, and wildfire management. Canada, however, has a robust sustainable forest management framework. We have federal and provincial regulations and acts that are designed around core forest values for Canada and the benefits that can be maintained from the forest over the long term. Reporting on this framework does include Canada's primary forests, which are developed naturally, largely undisturbed by industry. They support native species and naturally disturbance regimes. So primary forests really are an essential role in conserving Canadian biodiversity and storing carbon. So ongoing scientific research and monitoring is critical in Canada to guiding our decision making. We want to balance primary forest conservation with climate resilience and management. Experts have indicated that long-term carbon and biodiversity outcomes depend not only on human interaction with the forest, but also landscape patterns, forest age, forest structure, and natural disturbances such as fire and insect infestation. Climate change, however, is altering these dynamics all across the globe, and Canada is no exception, especially in the boreal forest. We have increasing wildfire severity, increasing insect outbreaks. This is compromising our carbon storage. And in Canada, we've recently done a study of 31 national parks, and it is found that 20 of them have changed from being carbon sinks to carbon emitters and carbon sources. So globally, wildfire seasons are increasing. They're becoming longer, more intense, increasingly unpredictable, and this is no different in Canada. It's a trend that we're seeing in Canada. In 2023, we had our worst wildfire season on record, and then I think we handed it to Brazil for 2024. In 2025, we had our second worst wildfire season on record. To date, in 2025, we've had over 8 million hectares burned. We've had over 85,000 people that have been relocated due to extreme wildfire events. So in June of 2024, Canada released the Canadian Wildfire Prevention and Mitigation Strategy. So this was meant to be a shared vision, goals, and targets that emphasize the need for inclusive action by governments, Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, industry, and communities. So the mission is to transform how we do wildfire management and build a shared resilience for Canada. So this must meaningfully include Indigenous peoples and nations. As we've heard in the previous session, Indigenous communities have been managing the land for a millennia. They've been using fire to shape and sustain their landscapes that they've used for safety, for food, for ceremony, and ecological balance. Today in Canada, these communities are disproportionately impacted by wildfire and smoke events. In 2025, 42% of wildfire evacuations were of communities that had 50% or more Indigenous populations. And of the 232 smoke evacuations, 90% were those same communities. So this really outlines an urgency and a need to embrace Indigenous knowledge and fire stewardship. We have a number of key initiatives in Canada. I spoke to a bunch of them yesterday at our previous panel, but one that I'll speak to today is the Thunderbird Collective. It was released in 2024. This is a collective that's really geared towards advancing Indigenous stewardship and doing that through advocacy, knowledge sharing, cultural practices, and strengthening sovereignty. Canada is committed to advancing integrated wildfire management on the global stage as well. In the previous session, we spoke to the IMFN. Also in 2025, through our G7 presidency, we led the development of the Kananaskis Wildfire Charter. And this aligns well with the title of this session, which is looking at calling for global stewardship of forests in a world of growing threats. We had previously talked about calling it a fiery world, and I think that a lot of the presentations today really lend itself to that title as well. But the Kananaskis Wildfire Charter does that. It calls for an increase of global capacity to prevent, respond, and recover from wildfires. It gives us a set of actions that we can take before, during, and after wildfire events. The idea is to build momentum for international cooperation. Canada also supports the FAO Fire Hub, which is an important platform for sharing expertise and best practices. Last week, we signed an MOU with Brazil on wildfire, and the week before that, we joined the call to action that Brazil put forward as part of the COP30 deliverables. Canada's forests are really a defining feature for the country. It's part of our identity and the cornerstone to our climate and biodiversity goals. So we're committed to managing them sustainably with Indigenous peoples, scientists, communities, and our international partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for sharing Canada's initiatives, not just highlighting the national strategies, but also the international support and partnership you mentioned, and particularly the Model Forest Network that you referred to, which is a good segue to invite Natalia. The Chiquitano Dry Forest in Bolivia, one of the international Model Forest Network, has experienced intensifying wildfires in the recent years. So from global, when we talk of the global stewardship, it cannot happen without local solutions. And this is where we would like to hear from you how you have been dealing with the wildfire management and recovery of these unique ecosystems, and how has been the collaboration with the different stakeholders, a theme that we have heard from the previous speakers that's crucial for driving solutions.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about the experience in Bolivia that we are working in the ground. It's a community based fire management initiative in the Chiquitano Dry Forest, and how we are, the lessons learned of a work of 15 years in the ground dealing with fires. Next, please. So Bolivia is experiencing severe fires in the last season. In 2024, Bolivia, the area burned were over 12 million of hectares. And what's interesting is the change of the forest affected by fires. In previous years, the average of forests affected by fires were only 30 to 35% of area of forests affected by fire, but in 2024, 60% of the 12 million of hectares burned in Bolivia were forests. So, and the Chiquitano Dry Forest is one of the ecosystems that were most affected. Next slide. So you can. When we talk about fires in Bolivia, we're talking a complex dynamic that is not only about forests, it's dealing with land use change, it's dealing with the climate change and the severe drought seasons that we were experiencing, and also with the livelihoods of people that depend on forests. When we talk about the impact of forest fires, we are not talking about only biodiversity of forests, but we are mainly talking about ecosystem services that are being affected and livelihoods of people that depend on forests. Next slide, please. So that change of behavior of fires in Bolivia force us to think on a new approach to deal with forest fires. So we are implementing a community-based integral fire management perspective that changed the way of what we think how we deal with forest fires in Bolivia. From this top-down emergency response that we are really seeing in the ground in countries like Bolivia to an integral fire management perspective where a collaborative approach is essential. So we are working with this initiative in Bolivia, 15 years now, where community participation is a key, but the collaborative effort of among stakeholders are crucial. Next slide, please. So we are working in the Chiquitano dry forest. You can see the map, and the orange dots are the communities that we are working with. We have been working with over 55 communities in the Chiquitano dry forest, but also in the Amazon region. We are working with local communities and indigenous peoples, with local government and national authorities. We are working with protected areas. We are working with social and productive organizations, and we are working with regional networks and global networks to showcase what are being the results in the ground and how we can escalate the impact of our work. Next slide, please. So we have an approach that is not only about response. We are mainly focused on prevention, and we are focusing on integral fire management that is also prevention and also restoration. So we are working with fire preparedness communities, territorial management, strengthening capacities and institutional capacities, including governance, because as I mentioned, we are working with a lot of stakeholders in Bolivia, and we all is gathered with knowledge and awareness in our work. The next slide, please. So here are some of the primary lessons learned of our work in Bolivia. We believe that communities should be at the center of the climate resilience. Local and indigenous leadership is essential for prevention and early action and recovery. So strengthening their capacities is a key element of our work, of a key element of the solution. We cannot think about fire management without strengthening capacities on communities. Local early warning systems for prevention and rapid response are actually working. We have some pretty good examples in Bolivia, in the Chiquitano dry forest, that allow us to avoid the expansion of forest fires in some regions of the Chiquitano and the Chaco region. So community-based early warning systems are crucial, and we need to combine the traditional knowledge with science and technology to improve this type of local early warning and rapid response. We have to connect the local work with national policy. Is crucial. We cannot work only on small projects in communities. We have to scale the good examples to national policy. In the case of Bolivia, we're working with the subnational initiatives, but also the national policy of fire management. We think that the integral fire management is a good strategy for adaptation and mitigation of climate change. We have to rethink how climate finance is working and how climate financing fire efforts are not only for humanitarian response. We receive a lot of funds because of these severe fire seasons, but we must rethink on a sustainable way of financing that includes that the finance goes to the communities, are flexible, and are flexible and sustain in the long term, because as I mentioned, this work took us 15 years of being there with the communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Natalia. Interesting insight. You unpacked the drivers, which is often, when we talk about data evidence, of course, understanding the drivers critically important, the land use change, of course, the climatic factors, but also highlighted the aspect of collaboration the theme that we have been discussing, and of course, global to local, but also linking back from local results to national policy. That's crucial. And certainly the amount of years it takes to build that. That's one important aspect to highlight. It often gets, it doesn't get that much attention, but it takes several years. When we talk about these initiatives and projects, it's not 2-year or 4-year or 5-year project, and model forest networks are an excellent example of long-term commitment that's needed to ensure that you build the capacity, you have the solutions in place. Great. So from the, again, local perspective, local example, now we move to the more regional. So I would like to invite Mario to talk about, so as we heard from even Natalia, climate change is leading more, and other panelists, that it's leading more intense and more frequent wildfires in Central America, damaging primary forests across the region, as the map we saw and other details we heard. So how could the regional cooperation be leveraged to respond to this emerging threat, and how could we protect across the country? What's the work that you are doing, and how we could, how it could be strengthened further to respond to this threat?
Thank you, Chita. Thank you for the invitation. This looks like a forest fire. Thank you for the invitation. I'm coming from Central America, and maybe prior to answer the question, I would like to share that, of course, Central America is one of the most vulnerable for climate change region. We are not an island, but we are an isthmus, and we are in the middle of two oceans, Pacific and Caribbean. Of course, we have evidences from the last decades. The climate change is a real effect. We have a reduction of rainfall, and we have an increasing of temperature. And this means more fuel for wildfires. And this is one of the most important, one of the important drivers for the loss of our forest. But in this sense, we are working with 8 countries: Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and in the Caribbean, Dominican Republic. In a regional perspective, the regional cooperation for us means 3 things, and that they have supported me with their answer. 1 is governance, 2 is field actions, and 3 is stakeholder engagement, as they say. Indeed, I remember, Brendan, I met you in the Selva Maya some time ago, which means governance. From the regional perspective, the governance in our region started with the council. We have a council of ministries for Central America. This is the platform of governance for our 8 ministries of environment in CCAD, Central American Commission of Environment and Development. And our ministries have declared the forest as a priority, the conservation, protection, and forest management in the initiative of Great Forests of Central America and Dominican Republic. This initiative includes a specific strategy for forest fire or for wildfires. But strategies or without actions or with stakeholder involvement is nothing. The Great Forest Strategy includes and go down with working with the directors of forests in a specific committee for the national forest directors, and also with the specific teamworks to attend the forests in the regions. Then after the work of people, we moved with the stakeholders, because the stakeholder engagement is very relevant. In our region, most of our forests are protected, are created by indigenous people. And we have a lot of traditional knowledge, as my colleagues described. In our region, we have a lot of traditional knowledge to care the forest, to prevent the wildfires. And I think this is a very, very important item. And the third point is related with actions. As I said, policies without action is nothing. And the actions maybe is the challenge, because the fire don't see the border. We have to work in forests between 2 or 3 or 2 countries. In the case, for example, Selva Maya, that is shared with Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala, we have to work together with 3 countries. We have here our Ministry of Protected Areas of Guatemala, and he has to coordinate with Mexico, and also he has to coordinate with Belize to attend the same forest fire. But I think that this some advances in governance that we have, but the actions also includes the coordination of all the stakeholders and all the projects. Fortunately, we have a portfolio for projects from Germany, from the GEF, from the GCF, from the GCF, and other donors. But the challenge is to work together all of those projects, because if not, all of the people came to the same place but with different approach. It's a challenge to work together to the people. And I like to share one example of this project. Indeed, with IUCN, CCID and IUCN are working in a project to promote the connectivity of landscape, the connectivity of forest in the region. But of course, to promote the connectivity, you have to avoid the forest fire. And one of the activities that we implement with this project is to prevent forest fire, to train people, to raise the awareness with campaigns to avoid or to prevent forests, to implement some options, to invest in equipment for actions in the forest, but also to train the forest fighters. I have an example with one young lady, forest ranger in El Salvador, for example. She was certified as a forest fighter, and then she came to her community. She trained a team, and she became the first indigenous in her community, the first indigenous people forest fighters team. Now they are working in the community, and this is an example that came down from the top, from the regional approach to the traditional knowledge and the action directly and field. And I think that this is the way that we work in the prevention. To round my presentation, I want to say what I started. Policies without stakeholder engagement, and without actions directly in the field is nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario, for outlining the three pillars of the regional approach. That, and of course, that it cuts across the national as well: the governance, the field action, and the stakeholder engagement. And what caught my attention again, what you said, that forests don't see borders. That's a really powerful statement. It's not one country, one biome, it's across, and that's really important message, I would say. Thank you all for your intervention inputs. As I said, I have some follow-up questions, but I will hold that for now. Let me invite our audience to ask any question to the panelists. If I could request you to maybe, or rather keep your questions short, and if you could identify who you are directing the question to, as well as introduce yourself, your name or your organization. So any questions? Or everything was clear? Okay. Well, I'll let you think. Maybe I'll let you think for a few more minutes. So I'll get back to some additional questions I have for the panelists. I have one follow-up question, Annie, for you. You did share about how the fantastic work you are doing is informing supporting the policy. I'll go back to the policy part. And I would like you to maybe help us a little bit even understand better what still is needed to do better in terms of understanding, and then what's more needed in terms of further engagement with the policy act, So how could that link be further strengthened and scaled up?
Well, very interesting question. First of all, in Brazil, we do have a very nice ecosystem of data producers. We have the INPE, which, like Gilberto is here, we are going to have a session on this afternoon. I think it's at 3. So INPE has a very good data set, very good platform, and people use that a lot. People from the government use that a lot. But there are still some gaps in terms of data. And even with Mapbiomas, there are still gaps, because there are many fronts in which we need data to deal with fire. Like firefighters, they are right there in the field. They maybe would need like real-time, very good, very nice, how can I say, spatial resolution data sets, but they need also to have internet to have access to the data. So there are many other, we need to have better risk maps, but it's not only one risk maps. We need to have risk maps that can predict how the season is going to be, how the month is going to be, how the day is going to be. So there is still a lot of what science can do. But what we have right now, I would say that we need to have better response to what the data is doing for. So with the data that we have right now, we have already information to engage private sector, engage local governments, state governments, federal governments on the problem. We can indicate which areas are very important to be tackled. And we can support the plans, operational plans, plans to control fires, deforestation, and so on. So I think we are we are at some point that we need to enforce and to enhance this integration between institutions and stakeholders, and the data is a way in which we can provide that thing, Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Annie. I would like to invite Brendan to respond to that as well, the point about better data and your experience and your response of how your work particularly has also been, you've been engaging with so many policy forums and, you know, at the national and other international level. So what's your response to that?
Well, I think the good news is that, as I like to tell people, remote sensing, after 50 years, remote sensing is finally useful, right? And Mapbiomas and the Brazilian Space Agency are really at the forefront, I think, of generating useful data from remote sensing and turning that into, you know, policy relevant metrics. So hats off to you and your colleagues for a great job. And I think the interesting thing is that it's at a resolution now, both spatially, like Sentinel-2's down to 10 meters, and temporally, in terms of how often you can get data from the same location, and we can get radar now at 10 meters, which gives you the structure of the forest, and all these metrics for telling you about canopy desiccation and flammability. So really, it's where you know, there's tremendous opportunity now to get timely data to all the stakeholders. And again, you talked about the Kaipo territory having a lot of fires. Well, we know why. I mean, the intact forest didn't burn. Edges burn. On the map, if we had that slide up again, which we don't, on the right-hand side, there was a lot of fire. They're not part of the tribal alliance. Their governance is poor. There's a lot of illegal logging, a lot of illegal gold mining. A lot of fires come about from that. So I think because the data can be targeted so much, we're better able to provide information about when and where and why the forest is burning. And I think all of that is really important going forward.
Thanks, Brendan.
And I think, you know, so I can just add one more thing. So we know that fire weather conditions are getting worse, but in the wet tropics, it's still very resistant, you know, but it's so it's really that interaction of, you know, unsustainable human land use and changing fire weather, which is really the threat here, rather than just the climate per se, at least in terms of the wet tropics.
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks for sharing your insight on that. That I'd like to build on that and ask Natalia, because you highlighted the role of prevention. You did mention very briefly about the prevention, but if you could help us to understand that better from your perspective, how community-based approaches have been strengthened through your work that you've been doing to prevent these fires. If you could unpack in terms of what activities you have been taking, what are the lessons learned, what has worked, what needs to be further strengthened.
Well, related to the previous question also, we are now trying to educate on the integral fire management concept, because it's not only about the importance of prevention, preparation, response, restoration, all this aspect of the fire management, but also knowing the ecological aspect of fires and the socio-cultural linkages that people had with fire in our countries. So that's why we are pushing this change of paradigms of thinking of forest fires only about the bad aspect of forest fires. So that's why prevention is an essential part of our work, but not only with communities. We work a lot with planning, land use planning, calendars, early warning, but we are now dealing with prescribed burns in protected areas, which society is not really ready to understand why we use fire to fight fire. So we need to understand also the good aspects of fire and the bad aspects of fire. So that's why the integral fire management in our country is really a new theme, not like in Brazil that has several years of discussions, but prevention is also about education, and not only the bad aspects of fire, but also the good aspects and how fires are related to cultural aspects of community. Communities use fire, and we have to integrate traditional knowledge with science, with policies, and to move forward in this integral fire management perspective that we are trying to do in our country.
Thank you, Natalia, for sharing that. I would like to use that as a segue to ask Megan. You talked about the support, of course, for global stewardship now, transitioning to global part. You already mentioned a little bit of it, but if you could help us understand from Canada's priority, where does the community-based approach is, and how do you see this both building from Canada's experience, but what just Natalia shared about, and why really again caught my attention is the good fire and the bad fire. It's not always the fire is bad. That's the important aspect to kind of get the message across. So from your perspective, from the Canada's support for the international efforts, what are the things you think or could be done, or what you have been doing? If you could share some thoughts on that.
For sure. So I think a lot of the what could be done or what needs to be done is dependent on what we need to consider, which are things that my panelists here have talked about the where, the how, the why things are burning. We're in a situation where these events are becoming unpredictable, which makes it very, very difficult to determine clear policies that would be needed to move forward. So we need to rely on the community-based approaches, and that's what these broader global initiatives are really meant to do. The Kananaskis Wildfire Charter, the call to action. These are opportunities for like-minded jurisdictions to come together to talk about the challenges that they're facing, where the commonalities are, how we can approach them on a more global scale. And so I think the path forward is really rooted in the path that we've started taking in 2025 and that we're really seeing being advanced through COP30, and that's pulling people together to make sure that we have more understanding and information sharing so we can better understand the where, the how, the why, and leverage tools that are being used and developed globally. And it's only by having that more collaborative and integrated approach that
the environmental institutions are promoting the conservation, the management. On the other hand, some policies are promoting incentives to new agriculture, to increase the agriculture, and this is the challenge. In Central America, and in this moment, we have a intersectoral dialogue started between ministries of environment and agriculture. And this, of course, move for actions. For example, to work in agropaisajes. It's agriculture in agropaisajes means landscapes in together agriculture and forestry. But this dialogue promote how to align the policies. I think this is the experience, and this is working in countries, for example, in Costa Rica. They have now the policies aligned and moving together. Not only the decision makers, the producers are working together, the foresters and also the agriculture and cattle ranch people. And this experience is moving in our other countries, and we think that this could come more impacts for the forest prevention, forest fire prevention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. That was really interesting insight. Particularly, we didn't unpack about the understanding and approaches of different ministries or line agencies and how they could respond, which sometimes could be not aligned, and there's a need for, and I particularly know from my experience of working in Asia, that's often the problem in many situations. So thanks for unpacking that. So maybe this is the last chance for you to ask the question. If you have any question from the audience, please, this is your chance. Well, I would like to congratulate the panelists. You did a fantastic job. I think really we covered quite a range of issues and topics, moving again across the scale from global as the topic or the theme to also local and regional. We covered the cross-cutting issues about governance, that's across engagement of the stakeholders, importance of data and information that you highlighted, Brendan and Annie, and of course the the leadership as well as both global and the national. So I'm not going to summarize this because there's a lot to, as I said, to digest. We will certainly publish a summary of this, and we'll be making it available to all the interested audience here and globally. But I also wanted to take this opportunity for the last few minutes I have to really express our thanks to the International Model Forest Network, who have been supporting us with this as well. And we have a few publications and resources whose QR codes are here on the screen. I would encourage you to take a look at them. Some of them are really focusing on the work of the communities as we have been working together to champion about protecting this primary and intact landscape. So with that, I would like to thank the panelists for your time and your interventions, really very helpful for us to advancing this agenda of addressing the threats to primary forests. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello. Welcome to this afternoon session. I'm excited that we have you all in the room. Come to the front if you would like to have some of the fans, air, and better sound. You can move up a few rows if you like to. Otherwise, we're starting the event now. Your Excellency, Dr. Deborah Mulonga Barasa, Cabinet Secretary of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry of Kenya. Dear Dr. Eva Kracht, sorry, there was a little switch up in the program. Director General of International and European Policy at the German Federal Ministry for Environment, Climate Protection, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety. Dear Dr. Sise and Dr. Chetan Kumar, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this event. My name is Nadia Emanuel, and when I don't have the honor of moderating side events at COP, I am the Program Director of the Climate Diplomacy Action Program implemented by GIZ, Germany's German Agency for International Cooperation. The program is funded by the International Climate Initiative, commissioned by the Federal Ministry of the Environment and the Federal Foreign Office. It's a pleasure to have you all here. And I would also like to emphasize this is a joint event together with IUCN and GIZ named Africa's Green Horizon from Addis to Belém. We're going to span the bridge from these two cities: forest landscapes, restoration and livelihoods, biodiversity and climate resilience. I would like to also take the opportunity to thank the colleagues of the Pavilion, of UNF Forest Forum, and the team that made this event possible. Africa's ecosystems, especially its forests, stand at the heart of global climate solutions. They have significant potential to promote decarbonization, climate resilience, biodiversity conservation, and green economic growth. Today's session highlights the critical role Africa is playing, driving forward nature-based solutions for climate and biodiversity. Our session objectives are as follows. We will highlight restoration and afforestation initiatives led by African nations, innovative, community-driven, and nationally coordinated efforts addressing land degradation, biodiversity loss, and climate impacts. We will showcase how national commitment is translated into tangible progress, reflecting a clear shift from degradation to effective forest and landscape restoration. Then we will explore the importance of regional and global partnerships, such as the Bond Challenge, in scaling impact across the continent. We will examine financing and private sector engagement to ensure sustainable long-term support for forest and landscape restoration. Let's dive right in. Dr. Eva Kracht, the floor is yours. Please come to the lectern. And I know you can stand here, and as there's a since you're, maybe you can introduce yourself because there was a switch in the system. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon. Yeah, it's already afternoon. I'm obviously not State Secretary Jochen Flassbart. I have to excuse him. He asked me really at very short notice to come here instead of him because he would have loved to be here. I know that the forests are very dear to his heart, but he's very busy in the negotiations, and you know how that goes. So sometimes there are very last-minute requirements. Well, Nadia already said, I'm Director General for International European Policy within the German Environment Ministry, meaning that I'm not part of the international climate team as such, but I work, for example, on bilateral cooperation with many partner countries across the world, on G7, G20, UNEA, forums like that would be something I work on. Excellencies, friends, partners, it's really great to be here. The second African Climate Summit in Addis Ababa positioned Africa's ecosystems and clean technologies as driver of solutions for decarbonization and for a climate resilient green growth in Africa. A call for action to restore forests, which actually fits very nicely in the landscape of this COP here in Belém and with the TFFF being developed. To take the African commitment from Addis to Belém, it's really great to have that you are here today to showcase some African-led restoration initiatives and their potential for global impact. I just had a chance to talk very shortly with Cabinet Secretary Deborah Barasa, and I told her the first time I ever went to Kenya, I had a chance to meet with my then minister, Wangari Maathai. So a very inspiring woman at the time already working on the issue. Research showed that deforestation and forest degradation in Africa leads to temperature increases, as in other parts of the world as well, high fluctuations in rainfall patterns, and more climate change-related disasters on the continent. At the same time, forests are at the backbone of most communities, as they provide food, medicines, wood, and employment. Leaders from 34 African countries committed themselves to the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030, while delivering sustainable development and promoting an inclusive rural transformation. The Congo Basin forests are a unique reservoir of biodiversity and a natural carbon sink which is crucial to fulfill the objectives of the Paris Agreement and the CBD as well, of course. The Belém call to action for the Congo Basin forests marks an exceptional mobilization of countries of the region and is matched by commitments to raise more than $2.5 billion over the next 5 years. The UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration represents a unique opportunity to scale up restoration in Africa. Its Science Task Force gives guidance on ecosystem restoration and AI-based solutions and earth observation. Great care is needed to uphold forest landscape restoration principles, striving for the best possible outcome, social, economic, and ecological, in the local context, each and every time. The Bonn Challenge has had and continues to have a catalytic role in the adoption of national commitments and policies and regional initiatives, such as the African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, AFR 100, or the 20 by 20 initiative in Latin America. More than 60 countries have pledged over 210 million hectares. Through our International Climate Initiative, the German Environment Ministry has promoted forest landscape restoration with over 390 million euro as a nature-based solution that is both scalable and financeable. For example, the Alliance for Restoration of Forest Ecosystems in Africa project implemented restoration activities on 17,000 hectares and is supporting further planning processes on 5.3 million hectares in 4 countries. Large-scale forest landscape restoration is feasible and effective, offering replicable operational models for other countries. Forest landscape restoration addresses the needs of communities, as a sustainable wood energy value chain project in Ghana demonstrates. 1 million native and fast-growing trees have been planted on 1,000 hectares to produce sustainable firewood and energy-efficient charcoal to cope with the rising demand. The IUCN Restoration Hub supports countries in Africa to scale up finance and implementation at landscape level. The right tree in the right place for the right purpose is a concept that acknowledges local needs to plant the right tree species that are best adapted to local conditions in the light of climate change. This project works in Ethiopia, Uganda, Rwanda, and Kenya to boost the supply of high-quality native seedlings for the implementation of ambitious forest landscapes restoration pledges. We need to build in biodiversity conservation and adaptation to climate change right from the start for resilient ecosystems and communities. Let me finish by drawing your attention to the fact, we might have seen it already, that last night our minister on behalf of the German government promised to President Lula a contribution of 1 billion euros to the TFFF over a time of 10 years. So we finally managed to be more concrete than our chancellor was last week. It wasn't his fault. We needed to solve some technical issues, and we're really excited to be part of that endeavor, and will continue, as we have been doing, to work on making the TFFF happen and operational, and hopefully produce a lot of good results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kraft, for setting the scene. We appreciate your participation. Thanks for being here. Next, I would like to welcome Your Excellency Dr. Deborah Mulongo Barasa. Dr. Barasa has been Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Forestry of Kenya since 2024. As an internal medicine physician and previously infectious disease expert at the World Health Organization, she has over 18 years of experience in the healthcare sector. Your Excellency, please come to the lectern. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a profound honor to address this distinguished gathering at COP30. I extend my gratitude to GIZ, IUCN, and all partners for convening this session and for bringing forests to the forefront of global decision-making. We meet at a decisive moment around the world. The triple planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation is undermining food systems, livelihood, water security, and economic stability. Over 3.2 billion people are already affected by land degradation. Restoration is therefore no longer an environmental ambition. It is a strategic imperative for development, stability, and peace. Africa has shown remarkable leadership. Through the Afro 100 initiative, 34 African countries have committed to restoring 129 million hectares by 2030. From the Great Green Wall across the Sahel to Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative, millions of Africans are acting with urgency and purpose. These efforts are creating jobs, restoring hope, and renewing landscapes. Africa is not waiting to be helped. Africa is leading. Kenya is fully aligned with this continental momentum. Our National Landscape and Ecosystem Restoration Strategy 2023 to 2032 targets 10.6 million hectares across 7 major ecosystems. Under the directive of His Excellency, the President, Kenya is also implementing a national movement to grow 15 billion trees by 2030. And so we are pledging the doubling of the Bond Challenge. Restoration has become a civic duty and a patriotic responsibility, embraced by government, the private sector, and communities. We are pairing policy with innovation. Through the Jazamiti digital app, Kenya is using technology to track seedlings, monitor survival rate, and ensure transparency. Restoration is being implemented not just as an idea, but as a measurable, data-driven national program. The economic case is clear. Forests support over 80% of households with essential resources. Rangelands cover nearly 90% of our landmass and sustain livestock and wildlife. And wetlands and marine ecosystem underpin tourism, water, and food security. Restoration is therefore not a cost. It is an investment in resilience and dignity. To achieve scale, we must transform financing. Traditional donor models are no longer sufficient. Africa needs blended finance, activation of carbon markets, private sector engagement, and diaspora investment. Restored landscapes must become bankable assets that attract long-term capital and create livelihoods. As we gather here in Belém, I offer 3 calls to action for our global and continental partners. Africa's restoration targets must be matched with global financing commitments that enable long-term, landscape level transformation. Secondly, restoration must be inclusive, equitable, gender transformative, and rooted in local realities. And thirdly, green value chains in forestry, agroforestry, rangeland management, nature-based enterprises, and carbon markets can generate millions of dignified jobs. So in conclusion, restoration is our pathway to resilience. Restoration is our pathway to equitable development. And restoration is our pathway to a nature-positive future. Let us together turn this decade into the era in which Africa restores its landscape, rebuilds its ecosystem, and redefines destiny. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for providing these valuable insights on Kenya's leadership and commitment to forest landscape restoration. And